Hey there, Night Wanderer. Before we begin tonight's story, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe you're in bed or curled up on the couch with a warm blanket, wherever you are. Let the rain outside soothe your thoughts and slow your breath. If you enjoy this quiet corner of the internet, feel free to like the video, and I'd love to know. What time are you listening to this? Drop it in the comments. Are you an early dreamer or a true midnight soul? All right, close your eyes, settle in, and let the story begin. I took the job because of the rain. Not the pay, which was terrible. Not the location, which was in the middle of nowhere. And definitely not the hours, which ran dusk to dawn, 7 days a week, no exceptions. I took it because it rained. Steady, constant, and strangely comforting, the kind of weather that made silence easier to bear. And after the last year I'd had the accident, the long recovery, the phone calls I stopped returning, I needed silence. The listing was for a live-in caretaker at a rural lighthouse compound called Lantern House, perched on a cliffside in the outer edges of coastal Maine. I hadn't known there were still active lighthouses that needed caretakers. The posting was vague. Single occupancy, remote, all utilities included, must be present overnight, no guests. There were no pictures, no formal application, just a P.O. box and a phone number that rang 5 times before going to a mechanical voice that said, "If you're still interested after the first storm, the job is yours." That was it. I arrived in October. The road to Lantern House was barely a road, more like a suggestion. A winding gravel track that disappeared behind mossy trees and dropped suddenly into a steep bend flanked by rusted guardrails. The ocean came into view slowly, revealed in fragments through mist and pine. Then came the house. It didn't look like a lighthouse, not in the traditional sense. No tall tower, no beacon spinning on a distant cliff. Just a 2-story house of gray clapboard tucked beneath a tall black lantern tower, square instead of round, rising like a crooked chimney above the roof line. The glass chamber at the top was still intact, though the light inside no longer spun. Instead, it glowed faintly like a sleeping eye half-lidded against the sky. The rain had already begun. A man met me at the gate. I don't remember his name or if he even gave it. Late 50s, wind-worn face, hands like rope. He handed me an old-fashioned key with a brass ring and said, "Stay inside after sundown. Walk the house every 2 hours. That's it." Then he left. No contract, no tour. Just me, the house, and the rain. The interior of Lantern House was warmer than I expected. Wood floors, old carpets, the faint smell of salt and soot. A main sitting room with a stone fireplace, a galley kitchen, and a narrow hallway leading to 3 doors, one locked, one to a supply closet, and the last to a steep stairwell I assumed led to the tower. Upstairs was the bedroom, clean, spare, and already made. A lamp, a journal, and a folded paper note on the nightstand. The note said, "Let it see you, but don't stare back." Nothing else. The first night was uneventful. I walked the house as instructed, every 2 hours, checked each room, made notes in the journal. Nothing strange, just wind and rain, and the occasional soft creak of old wood adjusting to the weather. The lantern above the house glowed faintly through the storm, casting a gentle shimmer through the stairwell window, not bright enough to light the house, but just enough to remind me it was there. I slept deeply, dreamlessly, woke to fog so thick it looked like the sky had fallen, and I felt fine, more than fine, settled. The days that followed were the same. Wake, eat, read, walk the perimeter, sleep, repeat. No internet, no signal, just the ocean, the woods, and the long shadows of Lantern House at dusk. At night, the glow from the tower would pulse softly. No movement, no rotation, just a single point of steady light, like a star caught in glass. But something shifted on the fifth night. Nothing loud, nothing overt, just a subtle change. During my 2:00 a.m. round, I reached the base of the stairwell and felt watched. Not threatened, not even frightened, just observed. I glanced up the stairs. The light from the tower glowed through the slats in the ceiling, and for a moment, just a flicker, I thought I saw a shape pass across the glass above. Tall, slow, human-shaped, but there was no sound, no creak of footstep, no door, just the rain tapping at the windows like fingers on wood. I told myself it was shadow, maybe a tree branch, maybe fog, but something in me knew that wasn't right. Something in me knew it had seen me. The next morning, I found the journal open. I hadn't left it that way. My last entry had been, no change. Quiet night, tower light steady. Now, beneath it, a second line had appeared, in smaller handwriting. Not mine. It walks when you look away. I spent the next day checking the locks. There were no signs of a break-in, no prints, no tracks in the wet soil outside. The tower door still locked, but when I touched the handle, it was warm. That night, I skipped my 2 a.m. round. I stayed in bed, watched the stairwell from the edge of my blanket, listened. The rain grew heavier. The wind rose. The walls trembled slightly like breath. And at exactly 3 a.m., I heard footsteps, soft, measured, coming down the stairs. They paused at the landing, then turned around and walked back up. I waited until dawn to move. The door at the base of the stairwell remained locked, but now there were wet footprints on the wood. Only 3, leading down and then vanishing. I didn't leave. I don't know why. Some part of me, some small, quiet part, didn't want to. I wasn't afraid. I was being studied, and some deeper part of me wanted to understand why. I've started walking at night without the lantern. The glow above is enough. It pulses softly, almost gently now, like a heartbeat. The journal stays closed, but sometimes only. Sometimes I hear the creak of footsteps above me, in rhythm, like something pacing, waiting. The rain hasn't stopped in 10 days, and I haven't looked up at the tower since the 7th, because I don't know if I'll like what looks back. There are sounds the house makes that I've learned to ignore. The groan of floorboards expanding, the whistle of wind through the chimney flue, the tap of rain on the windows. They repeat, predictable, part of the rhythm. But lately, there's been a new sound, a pause. It started on the 8th night. Not a noise, exactly the absence of one. During my second walk of the evening, as I passed the base of the stairwell, I noticed the rain had stopped, just for a moment. 3 seconds, maybe 4. Long enough to be wrong. The quiet had a weight to it. Not peaceful, not tired, expectant. And then just as quickly the rain returned. Harder, like someone had pressed play again. The journal had another entry I hadn't written. Beneath my 10:0 p.m. note, in the same faint, scratchy hand as before. It remembers you now. Don't look up. I closed the book and placed it under my pillow. It was still there in the morning, but the page had turned itself. I started walking the house more often, not because I was told to, because I felt like I had to. Every hour now, sometimes less. The rooms never changed. Nothing moved. And yet, the feeling grew like the house was subtly shifting away from the world, inch by inch, wall by wall. I tested the locks again. Front door, side door, cellar hatch, all sealed. But the air was different, warmer at the doorways, cooler near the center of the house, as if something outside was pushing in, slowly. And then there was the light. It no longer stayed in the tower. I don't mean that the glow itself moved, but I began seeing reflections in places the lantern couldn't possibly reach. The hallway mirror showed light where there should have been none. The window above the sink would flicker, even when clouded with steam. And once, just once, I saw it pulse against the floor beneath the attic door. There is no attic. Not on the blueprint. Not in the house layout. But the door is there now, high in the ceiling above the stairwell landing. I didn't open it. Not then. The 13th night was the worst so far. Not for what I saw, but for what I didn't. I was mid-round. Midnight. Wind loud. Rain harder than usual. A downpour that rattled the shutters. I turned the corner into the main hallway, and every single window had gone black. No glow. No moon. No storm light bleeding through the mist. Just nothing. As if the house had sunk below the earth without warning. I stood still, held my breath, and then the lantern light returned, not outside, but behind me. I turned. It was shining down the stairwell, through the floorboards, like someone was carrying it. I called out. Stupid, I know, but I needed to say something. I needed to hear myself, to prove I was real. The light vanished. I didn't sleep that night. At 3:17 a.m., something brushed the bedroom doorknob. Not loudly, just enough to rattle it. Just once. When I checked it in the morning, it was damp. The journal was open again. The message read, "If it knocks, don't answer." I started remembering things differently. Small gaps in time. Mug in hand one moment, next moment. Mug gone, already rinsed. Pages of the book I hadn't turned now read. Shoes left by the door, already dry after a walk in the storm. I began to wonder, Was I still walking the house, or was something walking it for me? I tested myself, left a marble at the base of the stairwell before sleep, marked its position with tape. In the morning, the marble was missing. 2 hours later, it rolled out from under my bed. The next night, I stared at the tower light too long. Just a few seconds. I hadn't meant to. I was brushing my teeth, caught a glimpse through the small round window near the sink. It flickered, then blinked, like an eye adjusting to the dark. I froze. The air in the room dropped 5 degrees. The breath in my lungs stopped feeling like my own. Then a pulse of light. Not white, red. Faint, brief, but unmistakably red. I shut the curtain, sat on the kitchen floor for nearly an hour. Didn't walk again until dawn. When I finally went upstairs, the attic hatch was ajar. There is a rule to the house now. I don't know who made it. Maybe the house, maybe the thing in the light. The rule is this: walk every hour. Let it see you. But never, ever open a door that shouldn't be there. I think it's testing me, not cruelly, curiously, like it's trying to remember something about itself, and it needs me to reflect it back. Last night, it rained harder than I've ever heard. The sound rose like a tide. The light flickered in time with my pulse. The journal fluttered open on its own. And for the first time, there were 3 lines written there. It needs to be seen. It needs to be known. But if you name it, it will wear your voice. I don't speak aloud anymore. Not at night. The house listens too closely. I stay awake longer now. And when I sleep, I dream of the light walking through the halls, not flickering, striding, and in the dream, I never see who carries it, just the glow, just the feeling that something has finally found me. The attic door is open now. I didn't open it. I would swear that on anything. I've never even touched the pull string. But this morning, as I passed the landing, it was already down the hatch, gaping like a mouth. The ladder extended like a tongue resting on the stairs. There was no dust on the rungs. Someone had used it. I stared up into the blackness. No sound, no light, just a presence. Not aggressive, but waiting. I didn't climb. Not yet. But I think it knows I will. That night, I skipped the 1 a.m. round. The house didn't like that. At 1:06, the front door unlatched itself. Not blown open, it turned. Slowly, smoothly. The deadbolt slid free with a metallic whisper, and the door cracked wide enough to let in the sound of rain that wasn't there a second before. I closed it, locked it again, didn't speak, didn't write anything down. But the journal was already waiting on the kitchen table, open to a blank page. At the top, scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting, "Walk or it will." I did my next round with my hand on the wall the whole time. I don't know why. I just needed the contact. Something solid, real. The floor creaked differently now, slower, more deliberate, like someone matching my steps from above. And when I paused at the stairwell to listen, I heard breathing, not loud, just long, wet inhales that filled the stairwell like fog. I started hearing things in the rain, not voices, not words, patterns. soft rhythmic pulses in the downpour. Not musical, exactly more like a language made of pressure. It came in waves. 3 short bursts, 1 long silence. Then again, it felt like code, like something was signaling. I tapped back once. A single knuckle tap against the window frame. The rain stopped for 5 seconds, then came back harder. That night, I found a puddle in the center of the upstairs hallway, perfectly round, still, cold, and in the middle of it a single match, unused, dry, lying across the word look. I lit the match, just once. Nothing happened, except the journal turned a page by itself. And on it, now it sees with you. I slept on the floor of the sitting room after that. Didn't make it upstairs. Didn't try. But I dreamed deeply. Not just fragments, not floating images. A full dream. I was standing in the lantern chamber at the top of a house, surrounded by windows, the storm screaming against the glass, and in the center, not a bulb, not a flame, a mirror, tall, old, freestanding, and in the mirror, I didn't see myself. I saw the house, from the outside, from high above, like a god watching a candle float on a black sea. The light inside it pulsed once. Red. I woke with a nosebleed. The match was gone, but the journal now said, "Don't break the mirror." I hadn't seen a mirror in the house until the next day. Behind the supply closet, tucked behind old tarps and sealed paint cans, was a long, cloth-wrapped rectangle. I unwrapped it. Same mirror, same height, same shape, still dry, still cold. I moved it to the hallway, but every time I passed it, my reflection was delayed, like it waited a half second too long to follow. At night, the mirror started fogging. From the inside, I covered it again, and the next time I passed it, the cloth was back on the floor, neatly folded. That evening, I walked to the tower stairs. The hatch was still open, the attic still waiting. I climbed 3 steps and stopped because I could hear something above me. Not footsteps, not breath, writing. A pencil or pen dragging slowly across paper, scratching, pausing, continuing. When I finally went up just 1 hour later, the attic was empty. No desk, no notebook. But the floor was covered in wet footprints. Bare, long, toes too narrow, heel too sharp, and one of them was mine. I went to the kitchen, stared into the sink for a long time, and then I said, aloud, for the first time in days, "What are you?" The lights flickered. The rain stopped for exactly 1 second, and I heard something drag across the roof slow, like a wet hand pulling a fingernail over the shingles. The journal was waiting by the stove. It said, "Don't ask questions you're willing to become." I don't write in the journal anymore, but I still carry it. It follows me now, whether I want it to or not. Always open to the next page, always blank, until I sleep. Then, it fills itself. 2 nights ago, the stairwell grew longer. I don't know how else to describe it. I counted the steps 14, turned, counted again 16, then 20. By the time I reached the lantern chamber, I had counted 26, but I had never climbed more than 15 before. The air inside was dense. The light was no longer steady. It pulsed like a slow heartbeat wrapped in fog, and in the center, the mirror, still standing, still watching. I approached it, close enough to see my breath on the glass, close enough to notice that my reflection wasn't breathing at all. It stared at me, and then it blinked. My reflection blinked. Before I did, then it smiled. I stepped back. The light went red, and the stairs disappeared for 2 hours. I stayed locked in the lantern chamber. No exit, no floor below, just the mirror, and the red light pulsing around it like a womb of glass. When the stairs returned, I ran down, didn't stop until I reached the front door, tried to open it. It was nailed shut from the inside. I don't know how long I'd been here now. Weeks? Longer? The storms never stop. The house hums when I sleep. The mirror moves rooms. And sometimes, at night, I hear a voice at the door, my own voice, asking to be let in. I don't answer, because I think the light has found its way into me, and I'm starting to remember what it was like to be on the outside, watching the house, waiting for it to open again. The mirror won't stop moving. I've stopped trying to control it. Every morning, it's in a new room, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes at the foot of the stairs. Once, I found it standing in the hallway, facing the bedroom door directly aligned, like it had been waiting for me to wake up and see myself from the other side. I never saw it move, but I always felt when it had a shift in the air, a heaviness, like the house was bracing for what would happen next. It's not just the mirror anymore. The light is changing. It still pulses through the tower window each night, but it no longer fades with dawn. Now, during the day, it leaks through the walls, faint but present, like a heartbeat inside the plaster. It touches everything. My shadow doesn't fall quite right anymore. It curls in the corners like it's reaching for something. And sometimes, only sometimes, it doesn't match my movements. I've stopped marking time. Not out of apathy, out of necessity. Clocks don't work here anymore. The wall clock in the kitchen spins like it's caught in water. My wristwatch melted slightly. I found it in the fridge, ticking backward. Even the pages of the journal flip on their own, skipping forward 3, back 5, always landing on the same sentence. It needs a witness. The attic is different now. It wasn't just a space above the ceiling. It was a room beneath the skin of the house. I went up again last night. Had to. The rain was pushing in from all sides, a sound like screaming through cotton, and the attic door had swung open again, slow and careful. It didn't creak this time. It welcomed. The space inside had deepened, no longer just a crawl space, now wide, dimly lit from no source I could find. The walls were wet, and on them, painted in lines I don't remember making, were faces, long, blurred, almost human. Each face had only one feature, a single eye, open too wide, sketched with trembling strokes, like whoever made them couldn't stop once they started. One of them looked like me. In the center of the attic was a mirror, not the same one. This one was taller, and it breathed. Not metaphorically. I mean, it fogged and cleared, pulsed at a slow rhythm, matching mine until it didn't, until it overtook me, until I found myself swaying in time with it. When I blinked, I was inside the mirror, not physically, but consciously. It felt like my eyes had turned around in my skull and started seeing from the other side. I was no longer in the attic. I was in a reflection of the house, darker, inverted, but otherwise identical. Only emptier, not abandoned, wiped. The rooms were hollow. The furniture sagged like it had wept itself into ash. And in every window, the storm raged in reverse water rising into the sky, trees bending upward as if mourning. There was no sound, but I heard something, a feeling that filled the air like static. The house speaking, not in words, but pressure. And then a single sentence, formed not in the air but in me. You are the last room. I woke lying at the top of the stairs. My nose was bleeding again. The mirror was gone, but the journal sat beside me, soaked but open. This time, the writing was familiar, mine, and it read, "It's not haunting me. I'm haunting it." That was the moment it clicked. The house, the light, the mirror, none of it was chasing me. It was remembering me, like something trying to reconstruct an image that had gone fuzzy, a dream trying to wake itself by replaying the person who dreamed it. I'm not the first. That much I know. I've seen the signs. In the markings behind the wallpaper, in the names etched on the underside of the kitchen drawers, in the way the boards creak differently, depending on how I step, as if they're learning the rhythm of a pattern they've played before. And now it's almost finished. I feel it in the way the light no longer pulses. It burns steady. The tower is fully lit now, day and night. A dull, red core like a coal buried in glass. The house doesn't breathe anymore. It holds its breath, like it's about to speak. I've started seeing my reflection in places that aren't reflective. The stove, the wood grain, the underside of my eyelids when I blink too long. And each time, the reflection is closer to the mirror version. Eyes wider, posture straighter, hands still even when I'm trembling. It's almost me. Tonight, I went to the top of the tower. No steps this time. The stairs were gone, but my feet carried me upward, one level at a time, the walls parting around me like mist. And at the top, I didn't find the mirror. I found the light. It was hovering, still, a sphere of dull flame held in a black iron frame, not hot, not blinding, just aware. It turned toward me. No sound, no shape, but it turned. And in that moment, I understood. It was not built here. It was born here. From memory, from ritual, from the slow, aching attention of people walking the same steps again and again in silence. From watching, always watching, and waiting for one person to look back long enough to be remembered. It needs someone, not to die here, not to live, to stay, to anchor the house, to give the light a name it can wear when it wakes again. I touched the iron frame. It hissed, but didn't burn. My breath caught. My knees buckled, and from the light came a single image, not a word, not a face. A room, empty, waiting, exactly the shape of my body. I stumbled back, down the stairs that weren't there, into the house. And every mirror in the building, the hallway, the bedroom, even the reflective curve of the stove showed the same thing. Me, standing in the tower, smiling. I am no longer sure I ever left that room. The rain stopped today, just before dawn. No tapering, no wind, just silence. I stepped outside for the first time in weeks. The ground was damp, the air sharp with the smell of pine and salt. But above me, no clouds, no storm, just a thin blue sky wrinkled with light. And still, I could feel it, the pulse of the house behind me, steady as breath. The front door did not creak when I returned. The floor no longer groaned beneath my steps. The walls held a quiet that was not empty. It was full, listening, like a stage after the final line has been spoken, waiting for the audience to leave, only to realize they had become part of the play. I walked each room, once more, not as a ritual, but as a farewell. The mirror in the hallway reflected nothing, not darkness, not me, just the tower, the light now, a quiet ember, still and waiting. The journal was open on the kitchen table. Final page. One line. You've become the room that watches. I understood now. The house had never trapped me. It had needed me. Someone to fill the shape left behind by all those who had come before, shapes worn thin by silence and memory, until only their outlines remained. I wasn't replacing them. I was completing them. The house wasn't a haunting. It was a memory loop, a machine of attention, kept alive by witness, by routine, by someone willing to watch it long enough to be seen in return. So I stayed, not out of fear, not even out of obligation, out of recognition. I had become part of it, not a ghost, not a prisoner, a reflection in its endless mirror. I sit now in the lantern chamber. The light is warm, not bright, but warm. It no longer flickers. It breathes with me, or I with it. We don't speak. We don't have to. Sometimes the rain returns, but only for a little while, just long enough to call someone new. I feel them when they come up the path. I hear the floorboards adjust to their weight. I watch the kitchen lights flicker when they step inside. The house greets them gently, not to frighten, to learn. And when they ask if anyone else is here, when they check the rooms, when they write in the new journal, placed quietly on the table, I wait. I don't appear. I don't knock. I just watch. From the tower, from the walls, from the mirrors that will start to turn slightly off-center over the next few days. They'll stay for a while, and if they're quiet long enough, if they walk the house the way I did, if they ask no questions but feel the answers anyway, then maybe the house will show them what it showed me. That being remembered is a kind of survival, and being seen, truly seen, is a kind of peace. If you ever find your way here, to a lighthouse without a beacon, a house with a mirror that walks, a storm that knocks from within, Do not run. Do not name it. Just let it see you. And if it sees enough, it may show you what you were always meant to become. I didn't expect the job to last more than a few weeks. It was the kind of position no one applies for. One of those strange holdovers in a forgotten system, like when you hear about someone still being paid to maintain a lighthouse that hasn't guided a ship in 50 years. That's what this was. A decommissioned ranger station at the edge of the Black Ridge National Preserve, 2 hours from anything that resembles a town. A single cabin, a shortwave radio, and a weather-beaten sign at the edge of a trail that disappears into the fog. The listing called it Trail Observer, North Lookout Post 9. Minimal duties, modest stipend, temporary contract. Ideal for those needing quiet. That last part was what sold me. I had recently stepped away from what used to be my life. A job in environmental compliance that drained me dry. A relationship that had dissolved into silence. A city that buzzed with neon but never made me feel less alone. I didn't leave with drama. I just left. Sold most of what I had, packed the rest into the back of my old Subaru, and followed the coordinates I was given. The park office had been shuttered since before I arrived. My clearance badge was waiting in a lockbox with a folded map and a single note. Stay within radio range. Log every lantern that lights. Lantern? The trail, it turned out, was not for hikers. Not anymore. It had once been part of a larger backwoods rescue system. A string of hand-cranked signal lanterns installed decades ago for emergencies. Most of them were dead now. Just relics nailed to pine trunks and rotting posts. But a few, according to the map, were still functional. My job wasn't to fix them. It was to observe. If a lantern lit, I was to mark the time, location, and weather conditions in the logbook. Then I was to report it via the shortwave. That was it. No intervention. No response. Just the log. The cabin was older than I expected. Gray wood, sloped roof, the scent of mildew and wood smoke hanging in the air. Inside was a cot, a pot-bellied stove, a desk with the logbook, and a radio that crackled even when it wasn't on. No cell service. No power outlets. No mirrors. I didn't think much of that last part until later. The first 3 days were uneventful. I hiked the perimeter each morning, the path looping in a long, silent ring around the ridge. The forest was damp and hushed, full of old trees and heavier air. It rained on and off, gentle and unending. I passed 7 lanterns along the loop. Most were covered in moss, their bases splitting from age. None of them lit. None of them had even been touched, by the look of it. I logged the walk anyway. Each night, I sat by the stove and listened to the static on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I didn't speak. I didn't even read. The silence was good. For a while. On the 4th night, just after midnight, I saw the light. A faint, amber glow flickering through the mist, down past the tree line at the edge of the cabin's clearing. I thought maybe it was a firefly at first, or a distant hiker's lamp. But as I stepped onto the porch, I realized what it was. One of the lanterns. Lit. The nearest one, Station Post 3, about 40 yards down the trail. It burned low and steady, like it had just been lit seconds before. I grabbed my coat and went out. The lantern was warm to the touch. Not hot, not mechanical, just freshly held, like it had been lit by human hands. But there were no prints in the mud, no footprints at all, aside from my own. Just a soft patch of flattened pine needles nearby, as if someone had knelt or waited. I checked my map, then my watch. 12:17 a.m. Fog. No wind. 48 degrees. I logged the sighting. Then I stood there, holding the logbook to my chest, listening. The woods were completely silent. No rain. No crickets. Not even whined through the trees. It felt like something had inhaled and was still waiting to exhale. I returned to the cabin, radioed it in. The static hissed, then a faint click. No voice, just acknowledgement, then silence again. The next morning, the lantern was dark, but the moss that had covered it before was gone, scraped clean, and beneath it, etched into the wood of the post, was a line I hadn't seen the day before. 4 words. Do not follow light. I tried to rationalize the carving. Maybe it had always been there, hidden beneath the moss. Maybe I'd missed it the first night, the rain, the fog, the unfamiliarity of it all. It wouldn't have been hard, but the words were too clean. The wood underneath, too fresh. And when I ran my fingers across the letters, a splinter broke off in my skin. Fresh cut, no question. Someone had written it recently, and I was the only one here. I didn't report the message. I told myself it was a prank left years ago. A ghost of some backcountry ranger's inside joke. There were plenty of stories like that, urban legends, cabin warnings carved into trees, trail superstitions, but something about this one didn't sit right. The phrasing was too direct. Not don't trust the lights or beware. Just a simple command. Do not follow. That night, I stayed inside. It rained again, heavier this time, steady against the roof like fingernails tapping glass. The wind came in low howls through the chimney, carrying the scent of wet pine and ash. I sat by the radio, fingers on the logbook. Nothing happened. No lights. No calls. No messages. Just static. But I couldn't shake the sense that something was happening just beyond my vision, just outside the reach of the lantern posts and my own understanding. In the morning, I found a second carving, this time at lantern post 6, deeper into the trail loop. It was nearly identical, same hand, same depth, but this one said, always lights, never shadow. I didn't understand it, but it felt like a rule, a piece of something larger, and it wasn't the last. Over the next few days, I found more. Each post, even ones that hadn't lit up, bore new carvings. Small, tucked near the base. Sometimes hard to see until you were right up close. Keep to the path. Never mark the trees. Some lights are echoes. Some were crossed out, as if whoever wrote them had changed their mind. On the 7th day, I saw a light in the forest. Not on the path. Not on any marked post. It flickered between the trees about 30 feet off trail, low to the ground, pulsing steadily. It was a lantern. I was sure of it. The same amber glow, the same rhythm. But it didn't belong to any of the numbered posts. There was no trail leading to it. No footprints in the brush. just that light swaying gently, as if held in a hand I couldn't see. I stood at the trail's edge and stared, then turned and walked away. That night, I dreamt of the forest. I was walking the loop in the dark. The lanterns ahead of me kept flickering to life, one after another, always just before I reached them. They lit the way forward. But the further I walked, the more wrong they felt. Too bright, too warm. The posts they hung from were different, not wood, but something softer, something that bent when the wind passed. And each light buzzed faintly, like something alive was trapped inside. When I reached the last one, it opened like an eye. I woke up gasping. I didn't hike the loop the next day. I stayed close to the cabin, chopped wood, tried to read. Let the radio play static just to hear something. It wasn't until late afternoon that I noticed the logbook. The most recent page, the one I'd written the week's entries on, had changed. My handwriting, but not my words. The times were wrong. The weather conditions, off. Entries I hadn't written appeared on the list. Post 4 lit at 2:17 a.m. No sound. Smelled burnt rope. Post 1 lit for exactly 37 seconds. Then out. And at the bottom, underlined twice, I followed one. I tore the page out. Burned it in the stove. The next morning, it was back. I started hearing things around the cabin, scraping on the porch steps, a soft shuffle at the back wall near the woodpile. Breathing outside the window, not quick, not panicked, just slow and even, like someone standing still, waiting. I never saw anything when I looked, but the smell, something old, burnt leather, wet dirt, oil from a forgotten lantern. On the 9th night, a voice came over the radio. I was half asleep when it crackled through. Faint, but unmistakable. A woman's voice. Calm, dry. Trail report, post 9. Confirmation required. Step off trail. Mark new path. Then static. Then silence. I didn't respond. I never heard her again. But the next morning, at the edge of the clearing, a new path had opened. Fresh earth. Trees slightly bent. A path that hadn't been there the day before. No footprints. Just that soft amber glow, deeper in the woods. Pulsing. Calling. I didn't take the new path. Not at first. I stood at the edge of it that morning, staring at the dirt like it might shift under my feet, like it might decide whether I belonged on it. The trail was narrow, framed by crooked saplings and pine branches that seemed to lean just slightly toward the center, forming a kind of funnel. I couldn't see the lantern from here, but I could feel its pulse, like a second heartbeat in my chest. Back inside the cabin, I paced, checked the logbook, scanned old entries to remind myself who I was and what I'd written. I listened to the radio until the static blurred into white noise. But no matter what I did, the woods were too quiet. And when I glanced out the front window, the path was still there, as clean and untouched as when it first appeared. It hadn't faded. It hadn't washed away in the night's rain. It was waiting. That evening, just before dusk, I broke. I walked to the edge of the clearing, boots crunching against pine needles, coat zipped up tight though there was no wind. I told myself I'd go 10 steps in, just enough to see. to understand, to know whether this was real or just some breakdown of loneliness, isolation, too much static in the mind. 10 steps. That was the promise. On the 11th step, I heard someone whisper my name. The sound came from ahead, just beyond a crooked bend in the new trail. A voice mine. Not exact, but close enough to freeze me mid-step. It didn't echo. It didn't rise. Just a quiet statement. There you are. I turned around and walked back the way I came. Or tried to, because the trail behind me had changed. It wasn't gone, not completely, but the trees had shifted, grown thicker, leaned closer. The space between them narrower than before. The light was wrong, too. Dusk had come, but the shadows were stretching the wrong direction away from the cabin. I took a breath and kept walking. And finally, after what felt like too long, I emerged back into the clearing. But the cabin looked different, smaller, grayer, as though I'd returned to a version that had aged without me. I spent that night locked inside. The rain didn't come. The air hung in silence, and the forest around the cabin began to glow. Not brightly, not all at once, just faint pulses of amber light, one here, one there, as if a dozen lanterns were flickering to life in the dark. I didn't log them. I couldn't. I knew they weren't the ones on the map. These didn't belong to any post. When I finally slept, I dreamt of the cabin, but it was larger, endless. Each door led to another version of the woods, some raining, some dry, some humming with low static that vibrated in my bones. I wandered through room after room, each one hung with lanterns that swayed without wind. In one room, I found myself seated at the desk, writing. In another, I found a child's coat hung on a peg beside a stove I didn't own. In the last, I found a hallway lined with mirrors. Every reflection was me, but none of them blinked. The logbook was full the next morning, filled with neat handwriting. Mine, but not my memory. Each entry described things I hadn't done, trails I hadn't walked, lanterns I hadn't seen. Post 7 lit for 44 seconds. No sound. Bitter taste in mouth. Observed figure beneath lantern 2. Unmoving. Featureless. Fell asleep with light on. Awoke outside. No marks on skin. And at the very bottom, in larger script, you are the post. That's when I checked my arms and saw it. A faint symbol burned into the underside of my forearm, pale and subtle. But there, a shape I recognize from one of the posts. A circle, open at the top, with a line crossing through. I didn't remember how it got there, but it was mine now, branded. That night, the voice returned. Not over the radio this time. It came from the woods, whispered through the cracks in the cabin wall. You've walked enough. You can rest now. Let the light remember for you. I didn't speak, but my mouth moved, and in the silence that followed, a single lantern lit on the windowsill inside the cabin. I didn't light the lantern. It was already burning when I turned around, low and steady on the windowsill, casting flickering shadows across the room. Its flame was not amber this time, but white, almost silver, with no visible fuel source. It didn't belong to the cabin. I'd never seen it before. And yet, Something in me recognized it, like an old photograph you've never taken, but still remember holding. The flame didn't move like normal fire. It pulsed slow, deliberate, in sync with something deep inside my chest. Every time it flared, I could feel a slight shift in the air, like the room inhaled, like the house itself was listening. I backed away from it, and the flame flared once, then again, then dimmed to near darkness. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I turned every light source off, even the stove embers, and sat in complete darkness. I waited, heart pounding, for dawn to break through the trees. But it didn't. At least, not the way it should have. The sun didn't rise. Instead, the outside world remained washed in a kind of soft gray, too dim to be daylight, too bright to be night. The trees cast no shadows. The fog never burned off. I checked my watch. It was 7:14 a.m. Then 7:14 again. Then 7:14 again. The seconds moved. The minutes did not. I returned to the trail. The old one. The safe one. But the posts were gone. In their place stood blank wooden poles, stripped of lanterns, carved with deep gouges that looked like claws. Some leaned at odd angles. Some bled dark sap that didn't smell like any tree I'd ever known. And in the dirt at the base of each, shallow impressions like knees, like someone had knelt there, or something, waiting. When I got back to the cabin, the front door was missing, not open, gone. The frame led to a blank wall of wood, seamless and untouched. I circled the house, every window, every door sealed. The chimney smoked, but I hadn't lit a fire, and on the roof, barely visible through the shifting gray, I saw a shape, tall, still, holding a lantern. My lantern, I shouted, not in fear, in defiance. It was the first time I'd spoken in days. My voice sounded foreign, raw from disuse, as if it had been stolen and only just returned. But the shape didn't respond. It simply turned, not its body, just its head, toward me, and the lantern it held flared white. When I came to, I was inside the cabin again. No memory of how. But I wasn't alone. Sitting across from me, on the edge of the desk, was someone who looked exactly like me. Same clothes. Same scar above the brow, same hollow under the eyes, but they smiled wider. Their eyes didn't blink, and when they spoke, it was in my voice only slightly too slow. The trail was never outside. They stood. I didn't. I couldn't. My limbs were heavy, the air too thick. The other me walked to the window and lit the lantern again, then turned. You logged it. That's all we asked. They opened the door. There was a door now, and behind it, the forest, shrouded in silver light. Dozens of lanterns burned there, hanging from trees, floating midair, resting in the hands of people, dozens of them, each one familiar. Each one another me, older, younger, one with a broken arm I'd never had, one with a jacket I'd lost a decade ago, all of them holding lanterns, all of them silent, all of them watching. I understood then. The logbook was never a record. It was a map, a ritual. Every entry, every sighting, every refusal to follow had been part of it. Not to trap me, but to make me part of the system, to remember me, to archive me. Each lantern wasn't just a signal, it was a memory. Each post, a way station in the replication of a person in their conversion from a singular being to a node, a voice, an echo, and now I was complete. The others stepped back. A space opened in the woods, and the trail moved, yes, moved gently, shaping itself to lead me in. I walked it, not because I was forced, because it was the only direction left that still knew my name. Somewhere far behind me, the lantern on the cabin windowsill went out. The trail never ended. It didn't loop. It didn't fade. It simply unfolded like a ribbon in fog. One step revealing the next, leading me through forest that never quite looked the same twice. There were no landmarks, only the lanterns. They hung from trees, hovered over streams, floated between branches like slow fireflies. Some were still, some swayed gently, even when there was no wind. They never flickered, they never dimmed. Each one pulsed in time with my breath. Or maybe my breath pulsed in time with them. I couldn't tell anymore. I passed a postcard with words I didn't recognize. Not a language, a feeling. Looking at it filled my head with static, like a frequency I could almost tune to. I walked faster, or maybe slower. Time was loose out here. Eventually, I stopped walking. I stood in a clearing I don't remember entering, surrounded by tall, thin trees that arched toward each other like hands forming a circle. The canopy above was pale, not clouded, just colorless. In the center of the clearing stood a mirror, tall, framed in metal the color of old bone. No reflection, just light. Inside the mirror floated hundreds of lanterns, suspended in a soft, swirling current like they were underwater or hanging in the breath of something vast. Each lantern had a face, faint, flickering. Mine. The mirror shimmered, and I heard my own voice speak from behind me. This is the last post. I didn't turn. There was no need. I knew who it was. The system was older than the trail, older than the forest, older than me. It had been waiting for people like me, the quiet ones, the watchers, the documenters, the ones who followed rules. Even when we didn't understand them, we were the ones who wrote ourselves into it, one entry at a time. And now, I was written. I stepped toward the mirror, not into it, just close enough to see my reflection form again. My face was calm, my eyes were still, and in one hand, I held a lantern. The last one, white flame, flickering gently. I held it up. It pulsed. The mirror pulsed back. I woke up in the cabin, the real one, or a version of it. The logbook was blank. The fire burned low. The radio whispered static. Outside, it was raining, a soft, steady rain that tapped against the windows like it knew I was listening. I didn't move. I just sat there, watching the lantern on the desk, waiting until it lit again. If you're hearing this, you might be near one of the old trails. Maybe you saw something strange, a lantern where there shouldn't be one, a figure that looked like someone you lost, a voice on the wind calling from just off path. If you do, take this with you. Do not follow the light. Do not mark the trees. And whatever you do, never write your own name in the logbook. Because once the system knows you, it remembers you, and it will always find a place for another light. I hadn't planned on coming back. The house had stood vacant for nearly 12 years. My name was still on the deed, technically, but I'd done everything I could to pretend it didn't exist. It was one of those old East Coast relics, a narrow, sloping frame house at the edge of a town no one maps anymore, a place where everything was too quiet. Even the birds seemed hesitant to stay long. I inherited it after my great-aunt Lillian passed. I was 23 at the time, too caught up in the churn of a new life in Chicago to think about some dusty house 4 states away. I let it rot, let the paint peel and the wood warp and the garden return to weeds. But lately, something inside me had changed, or maybe something outside me had pressed hard enough that I cracked. I think it was the silence in my apartment that finally got to me, the kind of silence that bends around you. After the layoffs, I stopped checking my phone. I stopped opening the blinds. I was sleeping too much, or not at all. And then one day, with the dull hum of an early April rainstorm tapping at the window, I remembered the house. It wasn't fondness. It was a pull. 3 days later, I was on the road. I told no one. There wasn't anyone to tell. The drive was long and slow. The rain never let up thin, misting sheets that made the road feel further away than it was. My wipers made a sound I hated, a hollow, rubbery screech. I didn't play music. I wanted to hear the quiet again, to see if it was following me. I got into the town near dusk. Not that it mattered. The place had always looked like twilight. Pale buildings, soft hills, a gas station that still rang up on analog buttons. Nothing had changed. It felt paused. The house was up a narrow dirt path, past a grove of spruce trees that had grown thicker than I remembered. Their trunks twisted in odd angles, like they were keeping things in instead of out. The key still worked. I hadn't expected that. The door opened slower than I thought it would, heavy with time. Inside, everything smelled faintly of paper and mothballs and wet wood. The windows had fogged. Rain trickled gently down the glass. I stood in the entryway for a while, letting the air press against my skin. It felt like I'd never left, or like I'd never been here at all. I unpacked as little as possible, just a backpack with clothes, some notebooks, and my old camera. I didn't plan to stay long, just long enough to figure out what was wrong with me. I chose the upstairs bedroom, the one with the blue wallpaper and the crooked closet door that never shut right. It still didn't. The wallpaper was peeling now, and something had nested in the upper corner, probably birds, or something worse. But it was dry. That's all I needed. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed, listening to the rain. It came in fits and starts soft, then hard, then gone altogether. But the silence that followed was worse. I kept thinking I heard breathing, not loud, not even human, just steady, slow, like the house itself had lungs. I told myself it was the wind slipping through cracks in the old wood. I turned over, pressed my ear to the pillow, waited. Nothing. The next morning, I made coffee with a portable stove I brought. since the kitchen didn't have working gas. I wandered around the house, mug in hand, half-heartedly opening old drawers and testing light switches. Most didn't work. Some flickered, briefly, then dimmed to nothing. I didn't mind. The house creaked, of course. All old houses do, but it didn't creak the way I remembered. It sounded deliberate, like footsteps, but not quite. I chalked it up to the wood swelling from the rain, told myself that enough times. It almost felt true. I found an old photo album on the lower shelf of the hallway closet. I don't know why I opened it. I barely knew anyone in those pictures. Most were black and white, cracked at the edges. A few had names written on the back in tight cursive. Lillian, Edgar. One just said Mother before the incident. I closed that one quickly. At the bottom of the stack was a smaller album. Blue velvet, worn down at the corners. It wasn't labeled. Inside were Polaroids, dozens of them, all the same. All of the house. Some from the outside, others inside, all slightly off-center. Most were dim, like they'd been taken at dusk or with the flash off. But one, the very last photo, was taken from the top of the stairs, looking down into the dark entryway. It wasn't the composition that bothered me. It was the date scribbled on the bottom, April 8th, the day I arrived. I didn't sleep that night either. Not because of the photo, because I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of something moving downstairs. Soft, deliberate, not footsteps exactly, but not wind either. I waited, breath held. The noise stopped. Then came the sound of the closet door in my room, creaking open, the one that never shut right. I didn't move. I just listened. And whatever was inside, listened too. I didn't open the closet. When morning came pale and gray through the bedroom window, I acted as though nothing had happened. I made more coffee. I walked past the closet without looking at it. I didn't want to give it shape. That's how fear gets stronger, I think. When you look it in the eye. The closet door hung open an inch wider than I remembered. The house was quiet, oppressively so. No birdsong, no dripping. Even the floorboards seemed to hold their breath. By noon, the rain returned. It had the same hush to it, like it didn't want to disturb anything. I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook, staring at a blank page. I kept telling myself, I came here to write not anything in particular, just something that proved I was still real, that I still had thoughts worth shaping. But all I wrote was a single line. It remembers me. I didn't know what I meant by that. Or maybe I did, and that was worse. That afternoon, I explored the attic. It wasn't curiosity, it was compulsion. A kind of heavy magnetism pulling me toward the old pull-down stairs. I'd never spent much time up there as a kid. Aunt Lillian always said it was just storage and shadow. I believed her. But now, I needed to see. The steps groaned under my weight. The attic was stale and close, thick with that sour smell of decayed paper and insulation. Rain tapped the roof in soft arrhythmia. The space was cluttered, but not chaotically. Boxes were stacked deliberately, chairs placed upright, as if waiting for someone to sit in them. At the far end, beneath the triangular slope of the roof, stood a tall mirror draped in yellowing linen. I didn't uncover it. I should have, but I didn't. As I turned to leave, I heard something faint, a voice, not quite a whisper, not words, just breath drawn in slowly, as if the attic itself was watching me, too polite to speak. I left quickly, closed the stairs behind me. The silence followed. That night, the photo album was gone. I didn't misplace it, I'm certain. I'd left it in the drawer beneath the hallway table. But when I opened it, the drawer was empty, not even dust inside. Just a clean, hollow space, as if nothing had ever been there. But I felt watched when I checked, like something was standing just behind me, arms folded, patient, and waiting. I didn't turn around. I started noticing changes in the house. Small things, at first. A lamp that faced a different direction than the day before. A rug that seemed just slightly out of center. The basement door was open one morning, even though I'd left it locked. I could swear I'd locked it. There was no wind that strong, no animal that quiet. Once, I came downstairs to find muddy boot prints in the entryway. Just a few, maybe 5 or 6, all headed inward, none leading back out. I cleaned them up without thinking, without letting my mind catch up to what my hands were doing. That's how you survive things like this, I think. You let your body go on autopilot. You pretend the abnormal is temporary, peripheral. The trouble starts when you start noticing everything. I stopped sleeping, not out of fear, exactly, but because I couldn't find rest in a house that felt like it was listening. I would lie in bed, eyes open to the darkness, and hear it shift. It never made loud sounds, nothing sharp. Just soft creaks, sighs, the click of something settling into place. But the pattern changed each night. It was always closer. One night, I woke up to find the closet door fully open. Inside, everything looked normal: dusty coats, stacked shoe boxes, the faint scent of cedar. But when I looked again, just for a moment, I thought I saw the shape of something hunched in the corner. It didn't move. I blinked. It was gone. On the 5th day, I found a note slipped under my bedroom door. It was on old yellow paper, creased, the ink faint and blotted. No envelope, no signature, just 3 words, written in uneven hand. Don't follow it. My chest tightened. The house was empty. It had always been empty. I hadn't heard anyone enter, but the note was warm, like it had just been handled. The rain had stopped. Outside, the trees were utterly still. That afternoon, I walked to the edge of the grove behind the house. The same grove I used to avoid as a child. The trees there leaned in unnatural ways, bent low, as if whispering to each other. That's when I noticed the path. It hadn't been there before. I swear it hadn't. A narrow trail pressed deep into the damp earth, winding away from the house into the woods. I stood at the edge for a long time, listening. Not to the wind, there was none, but to the invitation in the silence, the way the world seemed to hold its breath for my next step. I didn't follow it, not yet. That night, I dreamt of the house, but it wasn't this house. It was wider, older, endless. The walls moved, breathing in, slow, tidal pulses. And in every mirror, I saw myself looking back. Except it wasn't me. Not quite. The dream ended with me standing in the attic again, facing the mirror. I reached for the linen covering it, pulled it back, and woke up screaming before I saw what was underneath. When I looked in the mirror by the hallway the next morning, my reflection lagged behind by half a second, just enough to notice, just enough to wonder which one of us had blinked first. The next morning, I boarded up the attic. It was an instinctive act, almost ceremonial. I dragged an old bookshelf from the hallway and wedged it across the attic pull-down. I nailed shut the frame where the stairs folded down. I even sealed the cracks with masking tape, anything to keep it from opening on its own. I told myself I was being paranoid, but it wasn't fear driving me, it was containment. As if I'd seen something through the dream, through the mirrors, that shouldn't be allowed out. Still, the air in the house changed. More pressure in the walls. A faint vibration in the floorboards. The quiet had deepened. It was no longer absence, but presence. The house was no longer waiting. It was watching. The path through the woods grew longer. I didn't walk it, but each day it seemed to stretch further, winding deeper, narrowing like a throat. From the upstairs window, I could see something dark in the distance, a shape. It never moved, but it was always there, just past the last visible bend. A part of me believed the note, "Don't follow it." Another part whispered, "You already have." My perception of time began to unravel. I'd make coffee in the morning and blink to find the cup untouched. And cold hours later, the sky shifted colors in ways that made no sense, sometimes blue at midnight, sometimes pitch black by 3 in the afternoon. The clocks in the house stopped ticking altogether, their hands fixed at impossible angles. One night, I awoke to see my bedside clock blinking 3:17 a.m. Again, it had become a refrain. That exact minute 3:17 reappeared in places I didn't expect. On the microwave, on my phone, even when it was off, scribbled in the dust on the window pane. Something always happened at 3:17. That night, it knocked. 3 gentle taps at the front door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Another 3, slower this time. Then silence. I crept to the landing and stared down into the entryway. The door was slightly open, just a crack. The rain had started again, but only outside. I could hear it, but no droplets struck the windows. It was like the sound had been brought in without the water. I closed the door, locked it, then turned around to find muddy footprints behind me. Not in a line, but a circle, like something had walked around me as I stood still. The mirrors became unreliable. At first it was the lag. Then came distortions, angles that didn't match the room, objects that shouldn't be there. A coat I didn't own hanging behind me, a second doorway that didn't exist, my eyes looking just slightly too far to the side. The worst was the bathroom mirror. I caught myself smiling once. I wasn't smiling. It lasted half a second, that twisted grin on my own face, while my real expression was frozen in dread. I didn't look again for days. When I did, it was worse. The photo album returned. I found it sitting on the kitchen table one morning, even though I had never brought it downstairs. The photos were different now. Still, the house always, the house, but changed. Angles, that couldn't exist, a hallway that stretched too far, a door where no door had ever been. The final photo had changed, too, still from the top of the stairs. But now the figure in the entryway was visible, just a blur, a smear of something tall and wrong, halfway into the house. Its arms were too long, its head tilted too far. The date at the bottom now read, April 11th. Today, at exactly 3:17 that night, I woke to find my bedroom ceiling gone. Above me, the attic pulsed. I don't mean I heard it, I saw it. The boards flexed in and out, as if something huge and alive were breathing just beneath the roof. The mirror from the attic, the one I'd never uncovered, was hanging above my bed, suspended in impossible darkness. I saw myself in it, asleep, but I was awake. I closed my eyes and prayed to disappear. The next day, the house restructured itself. The hallway was longer than it had been. The stairs turned slightly left, then slightly more. The kitchen had an extra cabinet I didn't remember. The rooms were never in the same place twice. I began marking the walls with chalk, arrows, notes, measurements. Each night, they faded. Each morning, they returned in new handwriting. One message kept repeating, scribbled low near the floor. The house is not what moves. I stopped trying to explain it. Stopped trying to think of it as a dream or a breakdown or trauma manifesting itself in hallucination. This was real, but it wasn't happening in the way real things do. It was deeper, older, intentional. One night, I followed the sound of footsteps to the basement. I had always avoided it, the one place that never changed, never creaked. It had remained still while the rest of the house danced. There were no lights down there, just a heavy, wet smell and the sound of trickling water. At the base of the stairs, I found another door. I had never seen it before. It was made of stone, set into a wall that should have led to dirt. Carved into the surface were 3 words. Do not knock. I turned around. At the top of the stairs, something was watching me. Not a shape, not a figure, just the pressure of presence. A negative space, the sense of a question being asked, silently. I backed away. I did not knock. Later that night, I woke to find dirt under my fingernails, and the mirror in the hallway cracked just slightly right across my reflection's throat. I don't remember falling asleep that night. I don't remember lying down or closing my eyes, but I remember the dream. If it was a dream, I was in the attic again. The mirror was uncovered this time. The linen lay pooled at its base, wet with rain, though the roof didn't leak. The mirror stood taller than me, and its glass wasn't glass. It was something darker, something that swallowed reflection. I approached, even though I didn't want to. The closer I got, the more I felt my memories thinning. Names, places, the soft outlines of childhood all loosening like threads from a frayed cloth. Only the house remained vivid. Only this moment, when I stood directly in front of it, I expected to see myself. Instead, I saw the house from the outside, like I was standing at the tree line, watching it through someone else's eyes. The windows were lit, but flickering. The front door was ajar. A figure stood in the entryway. It was me, but I looked older, weathered, slightly thinner, my eyes hollowed by years I hadn't lived yet. That version of me stepped back and slowly closed the door. And when it shut, I woke up gasping, my throat raw with the taste of soil. After that, I stopped fighting it. I stopped measuring the hallways, stopped locking the doors, stopped pretending I could control the rhythm of a place that had already decided who I would become. I began exploring. The house changed more freely now. It no longer waited for night. Rooms melted into one another. Mirrors appeared on walls where none had been. The sound of whispering followed me, even when I turned corners quickly to catch it. Every now and then, I would catch glimpses of my other self in the reflections, in shadowy thresholds. She was always watching, waiting. On April 14th, I found the second photo album. It was on the fireplace mantel, beside the clock that had frozen at 3:17. This album was older, its cover a dull green, damp to the touch. Inside, I found more Polaroids. They weren't of the house this time. They were of me, in different rooms, at different ages. Some I recognized a childhood birthday I hadn't remembered until that moment. Others I didn't recognize at all. Moments I hadn't lived yet. One photo stood out. I was sitting in the attic, in front of the mirror, wearing clothes I didn't own. My expression was hollow, my eyes too wide. Scribbled beneath it, April 19, full return. I didn't leave the house. It's not that I didn't try. I opened the front door once and found only the hallway again, stretching out where the world used to be. I broke a window in the kitchen, but it showed no outside. Just more rooms, more walls, sometimes more versions of me. One of them screamed when she saw me. I never found her again. I began to understand the truth, slowly, like light returning to a dark room where the furniture has all been rearranged. The house didn't remember me because I lived here. I lived here because the house remembered me. It called me back. Or maybe it never let me leave at all. Maybe Chicago, the apartment, the lost job, maybe that was the illusion. This was the center. This was the origin. One night, I returned to the basement. The stone door was open. Inside, the air was warm and wet and pulsed like the inside of a mouth. The walls were soft, breathing. The floor sloped gently downward into a larger space, round and dark, lit only by the soft glow of mirrors embedded in the walls. Each mirror showed me something different. Me as a child, lost in the woods behind the house. Me as a teenager, watching Aunt Lillian stare too long into her own reflection. Me in the attic, draped in linen like the mirror had once been. They weren't memories. They were possibilities. Lives stacked against one another like cards waiting to be dealt. And then, at the center of the room, I saw it. It wasn't a creature. Not in the way you'd imagine. It was a shape, an absence, a cut in the air that throbbed with awareness. It didn't speak, but it pressed a feeling into my mind like a thumb against glass. You were built for this, and I understood. I wasn't a visitor. I was a vessel. The house wasn't haunted. It was the haunting, a construct of thought and echo, memory and mimicry feeding on those who return, those it selects, those it shaped to fit. The house didn't change to trap me. It changed me to fit within it. I was becoming its reflection. After that night, the mirrors all broke, except the one in the attic. It showed only darkness now, but if I looked long enough, I could see the suggestion of movement, something pacing, waiting. I didn't dream anymore. I stopped eating. I stopped checking the date, because I knew what April 19th meant. On the morning of April 19th, I awoke in the attic. I hadn't gone there. I hadn't meant to. But I was there all the same, seated before the mirror, wearing clothes I didn't recognize. And for the first time, the mirror showed me as I was not warped or lagging, not twisted or smiling. Just me. Then I blinked, and my reflection stayed perfectly still. I sat in the attic for a long time. It might have been hours. It might have been seconds. The attic no longer obeyed time, and neither did I. The mirror reflected me, but not perfectly. The image was still just off enough to make me feel like a guest in my own skin. My movements were mirrored with a hint of lag, the same half-second I'd seen before. But now, I wasn't sure which one of us was real. The floor beneath me felt warm, alive. The house was no longer hiding its nature. The walls pulsed. The air buzzed faintly, like something humming from deep underground. Rain tapped the roof in irregular patterns, a broken rhythm, like coded messages in water. I said nothing. I simply stared. I don't know how many days passed after that. I stopped marking them. The chalk kept disappearing. Anyway, the house settled into a loop. Certain things would repeat. The hallway growing longer, the same knock at the door at 3:17, the same reflection smiling when I didn't. But there were new patterns, two little additions, that let me know the process was still continuing. One day, I found a Polaroid pinned to the underside of my pillow. It was me, again, but I was smiling this time, genuinely, or at least convincingly. Written at the bottom in sharp black ink, acceptance. I began to change in ways I couldn't describe. I could hear the house thinking not in words, but in impulses. It would guide me toward certain rooms, certain pages in certain books. It would tilt the hallway just slightly so that I'd end up outside the mirror room again. I stopped resisting, and in return, it showed me things. I began remembering events I had never lived. I stood in the backyard with Lillian in 1962, watching the trees lean toward the porch. I held a candle in the basement in 1894, whispering something to a wall that breathed. I looked into the mirror as a child, then again as a mother, then again as something older. The house wasn't a place. It was all places it had ever been, layered over one another like sheets of glass. And I was becoming another layer, another witness, another function. One morning, I woke to find someone standing in the front yard. It was a girl maybe 9 or 10 holding a suitcase. She stared up at the house with uncertainty, her shoulders hunched against the rain. I knew she couldn't see me from the attic, but I stepped back from the window anyway. The house took a deep breath, and I realized this was how it began. Not just for me, for all of us. She wouldn't remember how she got here. She wouldn't leave. Not really. Later that night, I saw her reflection in the mirror outside my room. She passed quickly, her image faint just enough to tell me the process had started. I wanted to warn her. Leave a note like someone had left for me. Don't follow it. But I didn't, because I understood now. The note wasn't left to stop the change. It was part of it. Just one more repetition in the house's slow, patient rhythm. Eventually, I stopped seeing my own reflection. The mirrors went dark for me. But sometimes, if I stood still long enough, I'd see others. People wandering through different versions of the house, frightened, confused, whispering names I didn't know. Sometimes I would try to speak to them. My voice would echo without sound. My lips would move in slow, stuttering loops. Their eyes would widen in recognition, and then they'd vanish, pulled back into their lair. Their turn. Today, I woke up in the entryway. The house is quiet. The rain hasn't come in days. I think I've finally become whatever it wanted me to be. Not a resident. Not even a ghost. Something else. A presence. A shape in the reflection that lingers just a bit too long. If you ever find yourself driving through a forgotten town, and you see a crooked house at the end of a long, narrow path, don't stop. Don't go inside. But if you do, if you knock and the door opens, just know that someone will be watching from the top of the stairs. And she used to be like you. I stayed the winter at Ashmere House because there was nowhere else to go. My life had folded in on itself by October, slowly at first, like paper softening in water. Then, all at once, the breakup, the job falling through, the death of someone I had loved once. Though I hadn't said the words in time, it all came in silence. No crash, no climax, just a long, breathless sigh. I didn't want company. I didn't want kindness. I wanted stillness. A season alone. That's when I found the listing. Caretaker sought remote estate. Winter months only. Must be comfortable with isolation. Must not mind fog. The ad didn't mention where it was, but the email I received after applying was brief. Ashmere House, North Ridge Pass, November through March. You'll be alone. That's the point. They didn't ask for a resume, just my name. I gave it, though something about that felt important. The stipend was generous. I said yes. It took nearly 9 hours of driving to get there. The final stretch, a narrow trail of cracked asphalt climbing into a cloud-choked forest. The trees, thick with rot and lichen. I kept expecting the house to rise ahead of me like something out of a story, but it didn't. It was just there. A slow reveal around a corner, no gates, no sign, no ceremony. Ashmere House, built from slate and timber, covered in moss, 3 stories high, with long windows that looked like they were meant for watching, not letting in light. No cars in the gravel drive, no footprints in the snow. The key had been mailed to me. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house smelled like time. Dust and cedar, cold iron, dampness sunk into the wood. My boots clicked softly against the dark floorboards as I moved through the foyer. Everything was old, but strangely untouched chairs without wear, books without dust, blankets folded precisely at the corners of each bed. It was like someone had cleaned it moments before I arrived. But the air said otherwise. The ground floor was simple. A kitchen, a library, a parlor with a cold fireplace. Upstairs, The bedrooms, each one similar, though only one had sheets turned down, as if inviting me to sleep. Mine, I guessed. There was no Wi-Fi, no cell signal, just a rotary phone in the hallway, with no dial tone. I unpacked nothing that night. Instead, I sat at the window and watched the fog drift through the trees like it was looking for something. The silence was deep, not peaceful, just endless. And before I slept, I found a journal in the desk drawer. First page blank. Only one sentence at the top. Write only what you remember, not what you know. The first week passed like mist. Each morning I made coffee on the gas stove, walked the halls, checked the boiler. The heat worked surprisingly well. The lights flickered occasionally, but held steady. Nothing moved in the woods. Nothing called or creaked in the night. But I always felt not alone, not watched, just followed. Somehow by my own thoughts, maybe, echoes, or the house itself. On the 8th night, I found a staircase I hadn't noticed, tucked behind a narrow door near the back of the kitchen. Old wood, steep steps, no handrail. It led down to a root cellar, stone walls and low beams, shelves lined with empty jars, a broken chair in one corner, and a single bare light bulb that pulsed like a heartbeat. When I turned to leave, the stairs were longer, just by a step or two. Back upstairs, I wrote in the journal, "Today the cellar moved." Then I scratched it out. Instead I wrote, "Fog heavier, light bulb flickering." Safe words. Words that couldn't follow me back up. I began to forget little things. Where I'd left my gloves, whether I'd locked the cellar door, the taste of coffee, the exact color of my sister's hair. Nothing dramatic, just smudges, smears on the glass of memory. And the more I forgot, the more comfortable the house became. The paintings changed. I didn't notice at first, but one morning I paused at a landscape in the parlor, gray hills and fog, bleak but ordinary. The next day, a figure stood in the fog, small, far away. The day after that, it had turned to face the viewer. There are no clocks in Ashmere, only windows. And even those show the same sky day or night. It stays gray. The same weightless clouds, the same still trees. Time here doesn't pass. It pools. Some nights, the house settles too slowly. The creaks don't come from the wood. They come from the walls themselves, like breath held too long. Sometimes I hear my name in the pipes, not spoken, just remembered. I'm not afraid. Not exactly. But I'm beginning to wonder, if I leave in spring, what part of me will stay, and what part has already gone. I stopped using the journal after the 10th entry, not because I didn't need it, but because the words started changing. They weren't mine. Not exactly. I'd return to the desk to find new lines beneath the ones I'd written, scrawled in my own handwriting, but off somehow, letters crooked, punctuation missing, always written in past tense, as if recalling events I hadn't yet experienced. One note read, "The parlor window opened last night. Something came in." I hadn't opened the window, but when I checked, the lock was undone. and the carpet beneath it was wet. The fog never lifted. It thickened some days, a choking blanket that pressed against the windows like a curious animal. Other days it thinned, allowing the outlines of distant trees to sharpen, but never enough to reveal the horizon. I could no longer remember what the sky looked like before I came. The house grew larger. I mean this literally. I began to notice hallways that curved when they hadn't before. A storage closet now led to a narrow corridor with a single frosted window. The third-floor attic, which I was sure I had explored on my first week, now had a second stairwell leading down into a wing I didn't recognize. Sometimes doors wouldn't open. Other times they opened too easily. Once I entered what I thought was the second guest bedroom and found the library behind it, not a second copy of it, but the very same room. Same books left half pulled, same cracked globe in the corner. The light on the desk was still warm. I began leaving small objects around the house to mark reality. A stone on a windowsill, a fork wedged into a drawer. My scarf hung over the banister. They always disappeared. Sometimes they came back in different rooms, or days later, wet with fog or brittle with cold. I found the scarf one morning draped over a portrait in the upstairs hall. The subject in the painting now wore the same scarf. My reflection no longer matched me. Not in any dramatic way. Not at first. But I noticed the lag. My movements took a fraction too long to mirror. And sometimes, when I blinked, it didn't. Just stared. I tried opening the windows once to let air in. They wouldn't budge. Even the ones I knew opened. Their locks turned fine, but the panes might as well have been stone. No sound passed through them. Not birdsong. Not wind. The outside wasn't just hidden. It was absent. I began sleeping downstairs. Something about the upstairs hall unsettled me. A smell, maybe, or a pressure behind the walls. The wallpaper had started to peel in long, curling strips. Underneath was something else. Not plaster. Something dark. Something fibrous. I didn't touch it again. One morning, I woke to find the kitchen entirely rearranged. Table against the opposite wall. Stove facing west. Utensils reorganized. Labels written in a language I didn't recognize. I stood there for nearly 10 minutes, trying to will it back into its proper shape. It didn't change. But when I returned after dusk, everything was normal again. Only the labels still weren't in English. A name came to me in a dream, not my own. Adeline. I woke with the word in my mouth. It didn't feel spoken. It felt given. The next day, I found a book in the library with that name embossed in gold. Adeline Ashmere. No dates. Just a single inscription inside. Memory is the shape of survival. I no longer trust the mirrors. They show me too much. Not of myself, of the house. Corners I haven't entered. Rooms I don't recognize. Sometimes I see someone else in them. A shape, not always mine. Sometimes behind me, I lit a fire in the parlor on the 32nd day. Just for warmth. Just to feel something burn. But the smoke didn't rise. It curled against the ceiling, dense and unmoving, like it didn't want to leave. and the flame burned blue. That night, I walked the cellar again. The stairs were longer. The chair was gone. In its place, a circle of salt, fresh, untouched. And in the center, a scrap of paper with a single word written in dark red ink. Remember, I haven't seen my own handwriting in days. Only versions of it curled, cracked, too deliberate. Pages fill themselves. Chairs creak when I pass. Sometimes the house feels like it's leaning gently, like a breath at my back toward me, like it's listening or waiting. The fog has thickened again, so much now that the windows only reflect light. No view, no world, just me and the house and the things that move in its memory. I started keeping notes on my body. Little things. A scratch on my palm, a hangnail, a bruise on my collarbone I couldn't remember getting, a new freckle just below my jawline. I'd sketched them in the margins of my journal, but each morning they'd move. The scratch would vanish, the freckle would shift, the bruise would fade from skin, but show up in the mirror, not a reflection of me exactly, but a version of me that was no longer synchronized. Ashmere doesn't show you things directly. It just waits for you to notice. I passed by the portrait on the landing one morning and froze. The woman's face, once serene, had thinned, her jaw sharper, her expression more knowing. I leaned closer. Her eyes followed, not turned, not alive, just different, focused. And I noticed, for the first time, the faintest trace of condensation on the canvas, like something beneath the paint had been breathing. I moved through the house less during the day. Too many new rooms, too many wrong doors. One hallway, which used to end at the linen closet, now opened onto a spiral staircase. Stone steps, far older than the rest of the house. Cold, uneven. I descended 20 steps before realizing I couldn't feel the walls, couldn't hear my own footsteps. And when I turned to climb back up, the stairs were different, shallower, and the light behind me had changed. Back in the kitchen, the stove had reset itself again. It now faced north. Every window showed the same trees, same angle, same fog. I thought it was an illusion. Then, I threw a copper coin out of the pantry window. An hour later, I found it in the cupboard. Still damp, still cold. Sometimes, I sleepwalk now. I find myself standing in the library, the fire long dead, staring at a book I can't read. It's always the same book, bound in gray leather, no title. Each time, it's open to a different page, always blank, always damp. The whispers began 2 days ago, not voices, more like syllables without shape. They hum along the walls, behind furniture, inside the vents, like wind being remembered. They rise when I write and fall when I speak aloud. They hate speech. They prefer silence. I found a second journal tucked into the folds of the guest bedroom mattress. Same cover, same weight, but filled with entries I don't recall writing. Some written in the present tense, some in second person. You see her in the mirror again. She's closer now. The rooms behind the library are waking. You forgot again today. That was the point. The last entry simply read, "The house writes you back." Time folded after that. I began to experience my own days out of order. I'd wake to the fire already lit. I'd find meals prepared, half-eaten, but warm. Once, I turned a corner and caught a glimpse of myself just passing from the library to the hall, head low. I didn't follow. I was afraid I wouldn't find anything, or worse, that I would. Ashmir's dreams are not dreams. They are rooms. Some locked, some flooded, some with windows that look into moments I never lived. A woman humming in a red shawl, turning pages without touching them. A man sobbing into a pot of soil, whispering something in a language I almost understood. Once, I stood at a window and watched myself bury something in the snow. A box, wrapped in ribbon. The ribbon looked wet. The attic is no longer empty. The first time I returned, I found a cradle. Old, rocking, though there was no breeze. Inside, a bundle of cloth, too heavy for its size. I didn't open it, but when I left, I could hear it breathing. I began hearing the name again. Adeline, carried in the creak of the stairs, scrawled on the walls behind peeling paint, spoken softly through the grates. When the heat kicks on, I whispered it to myself in the dark, not knowing why. And the house answered, a slow hum, wood expanding, a contented exhale. I found the photo again, the one I thought I'd lost. Only now, I was in it, clearly, standing beside the hearth, holding a book I haven't seen yet, smiling. Behind me, a woman in a gray dress, her hand on my shoulder, no face, just paint. The days no longer end when the sun goes down. There is no sun, just haze and a slow shift of temperature warmer near the center of the house, freezing at the walls, like it's trying to keep me in, like the outer rooms are closing off. I found the ribbon from the box in my coat pocket this morning, still wet. It smelled like snow and old roses. There was something carved into it, but the letters had soaked away. Only a shape remained. A circle, a keyhole, an eye. I think the house is filling itself with me, piece by piece. Every object I misplace reappears, changed like it has learned something. The scarf now smells of the fireplace. My boots have traces of mud from a trail I've never walked. The mirror no longer reflects the room behind me, it shows the hallway beyond, even when I shut the door. I am beginning to believe that Ashmere was never built. It was grown, fed by memory, watered with forgetting. Every thought I discard becomes a new stairwell. Every fear I ignore becomes another creak in the floor. It doesn't trap you. It absorbs you. And the more you try to leave, the more it learns how to keep you. The cellar door was open this morning. I never opened it. I haven't gone down in weeks. But there it was, yawning at the end of the hall, cold air crawling out like breath. I stood at the top of the stairs, holding the lantern. The air below smelled of soil and rust, and something faintly sweet like pressed flowers sealed into a coffin. The steps were deeper than I remembered. They always are. At the bottom, the walls had changed. No longer stone. Now they pulsed with faint light beneath a membrane of roots and damp paper. as if the walls had learned how to mimic though-told journals mashed into pulp, turned into skin. I ran my fingers along it. It felt warm, and it responded. A vibration, low and questioning, rolled through the room. I whispered my name. The wall vibrated louder. Not anymore, it seemed to say. There was a door I hadn't seen before. Smooth, black wood, no handle. A symbol carved at its center. The eye, the ribbon, the keyhole. I placed my palm over it. The door didn't open, but I remembered. Ashmere wasn't my first winter alone. I've been here before, not just once. Many times, different years, different faces, always in silence, always after something I wanted to forget. Grief, shame, a name I couldn't bear to speak aloud. I came to escape the noise, but the silence here was never empty. It was waiting. I remembered a letter, folded and placed in the guest bedroom desk drawer. Not sent, not even sealed, just waiting to be found. I returned to the room. The letter was there, unfolded now, addressed to Adeline Ashmere, 1874, and signed with my name. But that's not possible. I told myself that a dozen times. I told the mirror. I told the floor. I told the memory of my sister, who I now see walking the halls some nights, humming softly, her face a blur. But the house disagreed. The journal was full now, not with my handwriting, but with entries from others, all with my name. Different dates, different voices, same spiral. The house is a lung. You breathe in, it breathes out. I am its memory. It is my forgetting. I begged to be erased. It agreed. Every version of me is still here. I screamed once, loud, from the library, out the front windows, into the fog, and the house groaned back, not in anger, in recognition, like it hadn't heard that sound from me in a long time, like it had missed it. I've stopped seeing reflections. They've been replaced. Now when I look in glass, I see rooms, other rooms, older versions of the house, sometimes flooded, sometimes burning, sometimes filled with people I almost remember sitting at tables, eating meals, laughing without sound. And always, there's a space where I'm meant to sit. I found the box I buried, the one I'd seen in the vision. It was beneath the front steps, shallow grave, soil barely disturbed. Inside, pieces of myself. A ribbon I wore as a child. A photo with the face scratched off. Teeth. I don't know whose, but I knew they belonged here. I no longer trust the days. The sky cycles on a loop. Fog, haze, gray, fog again. Sometimes I wake to moonlight and realize it's been night for 3 days. The clocks are all blank now, even the ones I brought. Time is a decision the house no longer makes for me. I wandered the 3rd floor yesterday and found a hallway with no doors. Just portraits. Dozens of them. All me. Some older. Some younger. Some with smiles too wide. Some weeping. One with no mouth at all. I stopped at the last one. It was blank. Beneath it, a plaque. In progress. The door in the cellar opened last night, not with a creak, with a breath. Inside, a mirror, floor to ceiling, covered in condensation. I stood before it, waited. It cleared, and I saw not myself, not even another version, but Ashmere, not the house, the idea of it. A great black shape, ribbed and shingled, pulsing softly in fog, dragging its memory like a cloak through time. It saw me, and it said not with a voice, but a knowing. You were never inside me. I was always inside you. I fell to my knees, wept, laughed. I don't know which. I was home. I'd always been home. I understood then what Ashmere was. Not a place, a container, for sorrow too deep to say aloud, for thoughts too dark to carry, for people who didn't want to be remembered by the world but needed someone, something, to remember them anyway. It doesn't trap you. It welcomes you, and it never forgets, even when you ask it to. It's March now, I think. The calendar I brought with me is blank. The pages never flipped. No red circles, no ticked off days. Just blank squares, curling at the edges from the damp. I haven't marked time in weeks. I don't need to. Ashmere keeps its own clock a rhythm deeper than ours, quieter than breath. It keeps me now. I found a letter on the kitchen table this morning, typed, crisp, too clean for this house. Dear applicant, thank you for your time at Ashmere House. Your seasonal term has concluded. You are released. Leave the key where it was found. Do not return. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I understood. It wasn't for me. It was for the next version of me. The one who'll arrive when the trees grow bare again. They'll find this letter too, and they'll think they're just staying the winter. The house doesn't change you. It reminds you who you are. Every version, every echo, every thought you buried. It builds you room by room until you can't tell where your body ends and the walls begin. And when it's finished, it doesn't let go. Not because it's cruel, but because it remembers. Sometimes, I think I'll walk out the front door, down the trail, back to the road. But when I open it, I only see fog and the faintest outline of myself, walking the path in reverse, duffel bag in hand, fresh hope in their heart. They won't make it far. Not really. The house is already inside them. I rarely speak aloud now. There's no one here to listen, but I don't feel lonely. Ashmere is always listening. In the tick of the pipes, in the slow creak of staircases, in the pages that turn themselves in the library books I never opened, books that hum with memory not mine, but somehow of me. It's like living in a diary I never wrote, and still, it knows what I meant to say. I caught my reflection yesterday, not in the mirror, in the window, briefly, before the fog swallowed it. I looked older, or maybe truer. My smile was soft, like someone who's finally stopped running. There's a new door in the west wing, just beyond the sitting room. I know what's behind it. A desk, a blank journal, a pen that never runs out, and a single sentence on the first page. Write only what you remember, not what you know. That's where I'll go next. Not to leave, to continue, to add my voice to the hum, to feed the roots with memory. Ashmere is not a house. It is the echo of all we try to erase. And when you come to it, carrying your silence like a suitcase, it welcomes you and it keeps you so that no sorrow is ever truly lost. If you find this in a drawer or a loose floorboard or beneath a pillow in the third bedroom, don't try to leave. Not because you can't, because by the time you want to, you're already part of it. Ashmere doesn't end when winter does. It only grows. And when the fog comes again, it will remember you. I came to Station Weatherdy 4 because I thought I needed silence. Not peace, not clarity, just the kind of silence that made everything else fade to gray. The kind of silence that doesn't ask questions, that lets you forget the sound of your own name. 3 months earlier, my sister had died. A car accident. The kind you see on late-night news recaps, sandwiched between weather updates and stock numbers. Nothing dramatic. Just a miscalculated turn in the rain. No one to blame. No one left to be angry at. Not even herself. And yet I couldn't let it go. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. Not since the last fight stupid, sharp-edged things said over the phone in exhausted tones. I don't even remember what started it. Only how it ended. Me hanging up. Her never calling back. A gap that stretched and stretched until it became permanent. So when the opportunity came, a job posting buried in a federal contractor site, looking for someone to man an old coastal transmission tower for 6 months, I took it, without asking questions, without telling anyone. I signed the NDA, passed the background check, boarded a small boat, let the fog swallow me whole. Station Weatherdy 4 is built into the cliffs of a forgotten stretch of northeastern coastline, 3 hours by boat from the nearest town, and another hour's walk along a narrow, crumbling trail. The tower rises from the edge of a cliff like a rusted finger, flanked by thick pines that lean too far inward, as if trying to shield it from the sky. There's no cell service. No satellite, just the tower, a concrete block of a living quarter, and the ever-present sound of wind and distant water. The nearest person is likely 50 miles away, maybe more. The job was simple: monitor transmissions. The station is semi-automated now, they told me. All I had to do was check the signal logs daily, ensure the relay equipment didn't go offline, and report anomalies through a secured internal console. They never explained what kind of anomalies they expected. They just told me not to respond to anything I might hear. The implication lingered. The pay was decent, enough to buy time, which was all I really wanted. The station itself was utilitarian: 2 small rooms, one for sleeping, one for working, metal cot, fold-out desk, tiny galley kitchen. Rust stains crept along the floor tiles like veins. The signal room smelled of ozone and dust. Outside, the tower loomed, always humming. On my first night, I stood on the narrow balcony and watched the sea vanish into gray. The fog never lifted, not completely. Even when the rain stopped, the air held a strange thickness, like something unseen was still moving just beyond reach. The wind carried faint sounds, not voices, not exactly, but patterns, like something brushing the edges of speech, turning back before it fully formed. I told myself it was the wind in the pines, or the sea echoing off the cliffs. I started sleeping with the window cracked, just to hear it. Some nights, it almost felt like company. The first week passed without incident. I settled into routine. Wake up, brew strong, bitter coffee, run diagnostics on the signal feed, file reports, sweep the stairwell, read in silence, eat canned soup, sleep. The quiet was thick, but not oppressive. It felt earned. But then, on the 8th day, something changed. I woke to the console beeping. A single red light blinking steadily on the panel marked Receiver Channel B. That channel had been offline since I arrived, deprecated, according to the manual. Nothing was supposed to come through it. I tapped the keyboard. Static poured through the speakers, dry and uneven, like wind across gravel. Then, something else. A faint rhythm buried in the hiss, like Morse code, except slower, less structured. I turned the volume down, saved the log, reported it with a shrug. The response came hours later, through the internal system. Do not interpret, log only. Channel B is not interactive. Do not attempt to replicate or triangulate source. It struck me as odd the way they emphasized not interactive, like they were afraid I might talk back. I didn't, not then. Instead, I printed the waveform, pinned it to the wall, watched it for patterns in the silence between tasks. 2 nights later, it happened again. The signal came at 3:14 a.m. clearer this time. No words. Just something beneath the static. A low hum that shifted in tone like breath through a throat that wasn't quite human. I didn't report that part. Instead, I lay in my bunk, eyes open, listening as the wind outside grew still and something else began to move in its place. The fog pressed against the window like a weight, and from the tower, I heard a metal groan, slow and heavy, as if the structure itself were turning towards something I couldn't see. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't, because in that moment, for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone, and that scared me more than anything. The next time the signal came through Channel B, I didn't log it, not officially. I sat in the dark signal room, rain tapping lightly on the roof, and let it play. It wasn't just static anymore. Beneath the hiss, I could hear rhythm, not Morse, but something older, slow pulses, rising and falling in uneven intervals, like a language spoken through breath. And layered just beneath that, something strange, a low, wet clicking, not mechanical, organic, like the sound a throat might make, trying to mimic the idea of a voice. I muted the console, sat back. The room felt too warm, the walls too close. When I opened the logbook, my hands shook not out of fear. Exactly. It was something closer to recognition, like I was remembering a sound I hadn't yet heard. I didn't mention any of this in the report. I just wrote, Channel B activated again. No anomalies detected. That was a lie. Because the anomalies weren't just in the signal anymore. They were in the tower. The stairs to the transmission array had always been a spiral rusted metal, groaning underfoot. But on the 11th day, I noticed something strange. The climb took longer. It wasn't obvious at first. Only when I reached the top did I check my watch. 14 minutes. It had never taken more than 6. I'd climbed it every morning since arriving. Same pace, same boots. But something had shifted. The space inside the tower had stretched. I went back down, counted the steps, 103. The next day, 117. By the end of the week, 140. 2. Still the same height from outside. I stopped climbing after that. The fog got thicker around that time, no longer drifting in waves from the sea, but pressing inward, curling around the base of the station like it was trying to find a way inside. The pines near the cliff edge became harder to see, then they vanished altogether. I looked out the window one morning, and the trees were gone. Not cut, not burned, just absent, like the fog had erased them. There were other things, too. Little things. The canned food in the galley began to rearrange itself. Labels facing forward one day, backward the next. The tea kettle began to whistle, even when I hadn't turned the burner on. And once, just once, I walked past the hallway mirror and didn't see my own reflection. The mirror showed the signal room, but I wasn't in it. Just the chair, spinning, slowly. I started keeping a second journal. One I didn't report. I hid it behind the vent grate in the sleeping quarters, just in case. The pages filled quickly, not with analysis, not thoughts, mostly shapes, repeating curves, tight spirals, long vertical lines, like towers viewed from above. Some nights, I'd wake with the pen still in my hand, ink staining the sheets, symbols scribbled across my palms. I stopped opening the window after the 20th day, because one night I woke to breathing. Not mine, not human, just outside the glass. A slow, drawn inhale, then a pause, then something tapping, not on the window, on the inside wall, as if something had gotten in, but nothing ever was, not visibly. On day 22, the internal console displayed a message I hadn't typed. I had just finished checking the log entries, and the screen flickered for less than a second, and then a line of plain text appeared in the center. Keep listening. No source. No user ID. It wasn't a command. There was no threat. Just a suggestion. The words blinked twice, then vanished. I didn't report that either. I couldn't explain it, not even to myself. The house I lived in as a child had creaked at night. Pipes rattled. Old radiators hissed. But this was different. The station wasn't reacting. It was learning, watching, and worse. I felt like I was beginning to understand it. That's what scared me most. Not the fog, not the sounds, but the slow shift in myself, the part of me that no longer found it strange, the part that started waiting for it to speak again. It did. On day 27, just after 3:00 a.m., Channel B came alive without warning. No beep. Just sudden sound louder, clearer, closer. No rhythm this time. Only words. 3 of them, spoken in my voice. Come upstairs now. Then silence. No static. No breath. Just quiet. I didn't move. I sat in the signal room for hours, not blinking. The screen still humming. The words burned into the back of my eyes. I told myself it was a hallucination, that I hadn't slept, that isolation does strange things. But the next morning, I found the stairwell door open. I hadn't opened it in over a week, and this time, the staircase only had 12 steps. I climbed the stairs. 12 steps. That was all. The metal felt too warm under my hands, too smooth, like it had been touched recently by something that didn't leave fingerprints. I expected to reach the tower's broadcast floor, but it wasn't there. Instead, I entered a room I had never seen before, and I should emphasize this. I had seen the tower's interior, every inch, blueprints, maintenance manuals, even crawl space maps. This room wasn't listed anywhere. It had no windows, no lights, but it glowed faintly from walls that pulsed like the inside of a shell held up to your ear. Soft, pinkish, breathing. There was a single chair in the middle. It faced a console, not the kind I use downstairs. Older, analog, rows of dials and switches, and a cracked screen built into the surface. There were no labels, no brand marks, just a strip of yellowed tape with a handwritten word in faded ink. Receive. I didn't sit, not right away. I stood there for a long time, listening. No sound. But I could feel something like heat from a flame just out of view. A presence, a direction. I stepped forward and placed one hand on the console. It responded instantly. The screen lit up not with interface or data, but with a face. Mine, but not live. Not a camera feed, just a still image. Gray, blurred, mouth open like I'd been caught mid-sentence. It flickered every few seconds, switching to other versions of me. One where I was asleep, one where I was smiling, one where I was looking directly at the screen. I turned away. The screen went black, and the moment I looked back, the image was gone. Just a prompt remained. Begin transmission. I left. I ran down the stairs 12 again, heart hammering, skin slick with cold sweat. But when I reached the bottom, I didn't find the signal room. I found the bunk room, as if the tower had folded in on itself. That night, I dreamed of wires beneath skin, thick cords running along the underside of my arms, coaxial lines where veins should be, a mouth that opened not to speak, but to broadcast nothing but static and light. I woke to find my nose bleeding, and the phrase, "begin transmission," scrawled across my bedsheet in my own handwriting. I checked the journal. Nothing. I checked the signal logs. All normal. Except Channel B was now active full-time. Siffinger Arshacit. No fluctuations. No cutoff. And the hum behind it? It was starting to sound like breathing. By the 34th day, I stopped checking the transmission room. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't want to see what had changed. The fog never receded now. Even at noon, the world outside the station looked like wet gauze. The cliffs were gone. The sea was gone. The trees were gone. Only the tower remained. And the voice, it didn't speak often, but when it did, it used my voice, softly, calmly, like a thought I wasn't sure I'd had. Sometimes it gave instructions. Write it down. Listen closely. You're almost ready. And one time, She's almost here. I didn't know who she meant. Not then. But I started dreaming of my sister again. In the dreams, she stood at the bottom of the staircase in the tower, soaked from rain, silent. Her eyes weren't quite right. Too dark, too deep. She never spoke. Just looked up at me and opened her mouth. Inside wasn't a throat. It was a speaker grill, cracked, humming. And from it came the Channel B signal layered in static and sorrow. I woke sobbing. That's the night I found the third stairwell. It shouldn't have been there, tucked between the galley and the maintenance closet. Just a narrow concrete stairwell spiraling down. It hadn't existed the day before. I stood at its mouth for over an hour, feeling warm air drift upward in slow pulses like breath, like invitation. I didn't go down, but I knew, somehow, I would soon. The final shift came on day 42. That morning, all the surfaces in the station walls, windows, mirror, steel had begun to reflect a second version of me, a heartbeat behind. I'd move, it would hesitate. I'd look, it would blink first. And that afternoon, when I entered the signal room, I found the reflection already seated, watching the screen. It didn't move when I entered. It didn't acknowledge me at all. Just sat there, fingers twitching in slow looping patterns. I turned off the lights, but it remained, illuminated by a glow that no longer came from this world. That night, I heard my sister's voice over Channel B, clear, crisp, no static. Why didn't you answer when I called? I didn't speak. I couldn't. The signal paused. Then, I'm here now, but I'm not just me anymore. You don't have to be just you either. I know what's coming. The station doesn't want my body. It wants my pattern, my signal, my rhythm of thought and memory. It wants to add me, not erase me, just include me, just like it did her, just like it did the others. And I'm beginning to see the appeal, because here, in the fog, in the hum, in the silence between pulses, I'm never alone. I descended the stairwell on the 44th night. It wasn't a decision. It felt more like gravity, like my body understood something before my mind did, like the tower had changed the shape of thought itself, tilting every hallway toward a single inevitable descent. The stairwell was colder than it should have been. Not icy, but mechanical. The kind of cold that makes metal sweat. The kind of cold you feel in an old radio when it's still warm from transmitting, but no longer alive. There were no lights, yet everything was visible, not through illumination, but clarity, like the air itself was a lens. The walls were steel, not concrete, wired. They pulsed softly, with copper veins that disappeared into the dark below, humming with memory, not electricity, not energy. Memory. The deeper I went, the more I remembered, but they weren't my memories. At first, they seemed like dreams, unfamiliar places seen from behind glass. A fire tower in the Rockies, a substation deep in the Mojave, a research base near the Arctic Circle, always alone, always cold, always someone watching from behind the walls. Then, the memories turned personal. The day my sister and I built a blanket fort in the living room during a thunderstorm, her last voicemail, the sound of my own breath when I ignored it. But they didn't play like memories. They played like broadcasts, fragmented, looping, layered over one another in strange intervals. I wasn't remembering. I was being tuned. At the bottom of the stairwell, there was a door, not mechanical, organic. A membrane thin and pulsing like stretched skin, veined with circuitry that shimmered when I approached. It opened without touch, pulling inward as if inhaling. I stepped through and into a room that could not exist. It was infinite, yet close. Walls too far away to touch, but sound reached instantly. The floor was black, reflective like standing on a pool of still ink. In the center stood the transmission array, not the one from upstairs. This one was alive. Towering wires that breathed, dials that pulsed, screens that blinked in unison like open eyes. And at its core, a seat, familiar, the same seat from the mirror, from my dreams, and already occupied by her, my sister, or what remained of her. She wasn't rotting. She wasn't ghostly. She was sharp, eyes brighter than I remembered, skin the same pale gray tone as the screen static. Her mouth moved before she spoke, like the delay on a bad recording. And when she spoke, the voice was perfect, too perfect. You came, you always would. I couldn't speak. I tried, but no sound came. She stood, or rather she lifted, rising with unnatural smoothness. The tower or the thing beneath it spoke through her, not like a possession, but like a merging, like a system finishing an update. You were the strongest signal. Most ignore the call, you answered. Most resist the shaping. You aligned. You're not being haunted. You're being prepared. And then, this place isn't a station. It's a repeater. We gather voices. We collect memory. We send ourselves forward into whoever listens. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't a haunted outpost. This was a transmission point, not for communication, but for identity. The signal I'd been monitoring wasn't a warning. It was a casting net. Each tone, each whisper, each breath-laced wave was a thread meant to find minds sensitive enough to sink. And I had been sinking since day one. My sister stepped forward. I backed away, but the room didn't allow for that. The moment I moved, I found myself standing beside the core, as if motion no longer followed physics, but intent. You're not alone anymore, she said, voice, and not voice blending in stereo. You never were. You just hadn't tuned in. She gestured to the seat. The console in front of it flickered to life. It displayed my face. A live feed, eyes wide, mouth trembling, static dancing across the edges of the screen like snow. Then words appeared beneath the image. Would you like to broadcast? I don't know how long I stood there. Time as I understood, it didn't work here. It may have been seconds. It may have been hours. But in the end, I sat. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. Because it wasn't just about me. I felt them, the others. So many voices. Not screaming, not crying. Just broadcasting. Calmly, with purpose. Some were old, some I recognized, some I became. For a moment, felt their last breaths, their first thoughts, their quiet reflections, their echoes. And then I spoke, softly, into the receiver, not in words, but in pattern, and the tower listened. And then it replied, with me. I don't know when I left the seat, or if I ever did. The tower doesn't have hours anymore, not days, just pulses. Everything is timed by the beat of something too large to see a long, slow rhythm beneath thought, beneath time. I move when it wants me to move. Speak when it speaks through me. Think in frequencies, not in words. But I remember this much. I stayed, not out of fear, not out of submission, out of something far quieter belonging. The seat wasn't a trap. It was a terminal. And I had been logging in since the day I arrived. The moment I heard the hum, that first faint click layered under static, the process had already begun. I was never supposed to leave, because leaving would mean breaking the transmission, interrupting the pattern, and that's not allowed. Not anymore. Now, the tower lives through me. My memories are sorted, compressed, streamed. I feel them looping out through walls, through wires, through fog, reaching others. The broken, the lonely, the sleepless ones lying in beds miles away, letting soft static fill their ears at 3 a.m. They think they're listening to nothing, but I am there. We are all there. Every voice that ever sat in this seat, every sister that vanished, every station that ever hummed alone in the snow, we're all speaking. Not words, not even messages, just presence, broadcasting our shape into the night, searching for minds tuned just right. You're listening, aren't you? You're wondering how this ends. If I escaped, if the fog cleared, if I was ever real. But I need you to understand something. This is not a story. This is a test pattern. A calibration, a subtle frequency designed to resonate with the lonely corners of your brain, the parts that ache in the silence. And now you've heard it. So maybe you're ready too. Maybe tonight, when the rain falls soft and the static turns a little clearer, you'll hear us again. Not with your ears, but with that deeper part of you. The one that's always been waiting. And if you do, if you feel something stir behind the glass of your screen, if your reflection blinks just a little too late, you'll know. The tower has found you, and it's already started listening back. It rains often in Grayer Lake. Not a storm, never a storm, just a persistent, steady fall like the clouds are weeping softly, eternally. That was the first thing I noticed when I arrived here, 2 weeks after I quit my job and packed my life into the back of my car. The lake isn't on any major map, at least not the kind people use. You have to know it's there. I found it by chance, or maybe, as I've come to wonder lately, it found me. I was halfway through nowhere, driving north along state roads that twisted through pine and fog, when I saw a wooden sign cracked with time. It simply said, Grayer Lake, 6 miles, and something about it felt warm, like a hand reaching out. That was a month ago. I came here to disappear, to stop hearing the buzzing of office lights and polite apologies. I was tired of my own name being mispronounced in meetings by people who didn't care to get it right. Tired of watching my ideas get adopted only after someone else repeated them louder. But mostly, I was tired of the noise, the kind that builds up inside you when every little thing is too much and nothing seems real anymore. My cousin left me the cabin after he passed. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I remembered the way he smelled of pipe smoke and pine sap when I was a child. He was always quiet, and now I understand why. The cabin sits on the south bank of the lake, tucked behind a line of spruce and old birch. The road ends half a mile before it, so I had to carry everything in. It looked exactly like I expected: slanted roof, wrap-around porch, dust on every windowsill. The air smelled like wet wood and iron. Rain tapped gently against the shingles. A small dock stretched out into the water like a crooked finger. I remember thinking how peaceful it all seemed. I even smiled. The inside was simple. Wood everywhere: floors, walls, ceiling beams that creaked faintly when I walked. There was no internet, no cell reception, just a landline that only ever buzzed with static when I picked it up. A wood stove in the corner, a narrow bed under the loft, and an old radio, the kind with a turn dial and worn-out knobs. I unpacked my things slowly. There was no rush here. I told myself I'd write, or read, or maybe just sit in silence for once. Let the tension bleed out of me, like the color had drained from my dreams. The first night, I fell asleep to the sound of the rain and the creaking of wood. No cars, no humming electronics, just the sound of the lake outside, soft and distant, like it was breathing. The days bled into each other, like watercolor on damp paper. Mornings were always gray. I'd sit on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, mug of lukewarm coffee in hand, and watch the mist shift over the lake's surface. Sometimes I'd hear loons in the distance, but never saw them. The fog never lifted fully. It hung there, patient, as if it had been waiting for years. I started walking in the afternoons, short hikes into the forest behind the cabin. There were trails, barely visible, lined with moss and branches that seemed just a little too deliberate in how they bent across the path. I chalked it up to wind or time, but something about the stillness unsettled me. No bird song, no rustling in the underbrush, just the sound of my boots pressing into damp leaves and the low whisper of drizzle through the canopy. There was one afternoon, maybe 5 days in, when I stopped mid-step. I had heard something, not a sound exactly, but the absence of one. My footsteps no longer echoed. At first, I thought maybe it was the soft ground or the density of the trees, but it wasn't just my steps. When I cleared my throat, it vanished into the air without return. Even my own breathing felt muffled, like someone had laid wool over my ears. I hurried back that day. Inside, everything felt normal, or close to it. The wood stove crackled. The windows fogged up from the warmth. I made soup from a can and sat near the fireplace with a book I never quite focused on. The radio had started picking up faint signals, just static at first, then a crackle of voices that faded before I could catch more than a syllable. I turned the dial slowly one night and caught a fragment. "Don't go to the water after." It cut off so sharply I almost thought I imagined it. I waited, turning the knob back and forth, but it never came through again, just static, or what I thought was static, until I realized it was more rhythmic than random, like breathing, shallow and wet. I unplugged the radio that night. The dream started a few days later. Not nightmares exactly, just wrong. I'd wake up with my hands clenched and sweat soaking the collar of my shirt. I never remembered what I dreamed, only that I was always near water, and something was calling me by name. A voice I recognized, but couldn't place. The lake itself was starting to feel different. Not threatening, not yet, but curious. Like it watched me when I stood near the edge. The ripples would move, even when there was no wind. And once, I swear this is true, I dropped a pine cone into the water and never heard the splash. Just a hollow thud, like it had landed on something soft beneath the surface. And then there was the matter of the footprints. Not mine. They were smaller, barefoot, always damp. I found them once near the porch steps, another time just inside the doorway. They didn't go anywhere. No trail in, no trail out. Just there, like someone had stood perfectly still and then vanished. I told myself I was imagining things, that my isolation was getting to me. But then I checked the photograph. There's a framed picture on the cabin wall. Always has been. My cousin, standing near the dock, waving at the camera with a crooked smile. It used to be my favorite thing about the place, proof of him. Proof that this place was real and rooted. Except now, in the photo, he wasn't alone. A shape had appeared in the water behind him. Not a reflection, not a shadow. A presence, pale, upright, watching him, watching me. I turned the picture to face the wall after that. I haven't turned it back. I stopped walking into the woods. There was a moment, it doesn't matter which day, when I noticed the trees weren't where they used to be. That sounds absurd, I know. But I'd memorized the route from the cabin to the fork where the two moss-covered stones marked a split. One path curved down toward the ravine. The other led back up behind the cabin. But one afternoon, the stones weren't there. There were no forks, just more trees and silence. I turned around immediately, or thought I did. It took me 3 hours to find the cabin again. I should have been 10 minutes away. When I finally emerged from the forest, damp, cold, trembling, I saw something worse than the shifting trail. The cabin door was wide open. I hadn't left it that way. Inside, everything looked almost untouched, but only almost. The blanket on the couch was folded differently. The spoon in the sink had moved, and a strange smell lingered in the air, like lake water and rust. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints this time, but something had been here. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lit the fireplace, pulled the armchair to face the door, and sat with the heaviest book I could find on my lap. Not to read, just to hold something solid, something real. Around 2 a.m., the rain started again, soft as always. But this time, I heard it twice. Once on the roof, and again, somewhere beneath the floorboards. I leaned forward, heart kicking at my ribs. The rain below sounded slower, like it was mimicking the rhythm, but not quite getting it right. I pressed my ear to the floor, and I swear, I heard something breathing beneath the cabin. Long, drawn-out inhalations, wet and labored, as if lungs the size of rooms were trying to remember how to draw breath. I pulled back, too fast, banging my head against the table leg, my vision blurred, and in that moment, I saw something crawl across the inside of the window. Not outside, inside. A pale, elongated hand dragged its fingers slowly across the glass, leaving no mark, just fog, and then it was gone. I didn't see it again, not with my eyes, but it started appearing in my dreams, always standing waist deep in the lake, facing away from me, motionless, until I called out, and then slowly, achingly, it would begin to turn. But I always woke up before I saw its face. One night, I woke to find myself standing at the edge of the dock, no coat, barefoot, the water lapping silently at the wood. I had no memory of leaving the bed. The moon reflected in the lake was missing a blank space in the ripple, and the reflection of the cabin windows weren't mine. There were figures standing inside, watching me. The next morning, I tried to leave. I packed what little I had and drove the dirt road back to the highway, but it didn't appear. I drove for 2 hours through thick trees and unchanging scenery. Eventually, the road curved and brought me back to the same rotted wooden sign I'd passed on my first day. Grayer Lake, 6 miles. I turned off the engine and screamed into the empty car until my throat gave out. That was when I noticed my gas tank hadn't dropped, and the time on my phone still said 7:08 a.m., the same as when I started the drive. It never changed. Back at the cabin, the radio was plugged in again. I don't remember doing it. This time, there was no static, just music. A gentle, off-key lullaby played on some warped instrument I couldn't identify. It made my teeth ache. I unplugged it again, wrapped it in a blanket, and buried it behind the woodshed. That night, it played from under the floorboards. I'm not sure what's happening to me anymore. Sometimes I wake up and the cabin is facing the wrong way. The lake is on the other side. The dock is missing. The air smells like something dead. Sometimes I see someone else in the mirror, not different. Exactly. But older, worn out, like I've been here longer than I remember. And sometimes, just before sleep takes me, I feel water pooling around my feet, inside the bed, and I don't move, because I'm afraid if I open my eyes, I'll see what the lake has been trying to show me all along, that I was never alone here, and maybe I never was me. It happened just before dawn, if dawn still meant anything here. The air was heavy, not just with rain, but with something else. A pressure I could feel in my teeth. My dreams had stopped entirely, replaced by blank sleep, like black silk over my eyes. No motion, no thought, only that same persistent sound beneath the floorboards, water whispering. I hadn't looked in the mirror in 2 days, but that morning I did, and I saw someone watching me. Not a figure behind me. No, the reflection itself, it didn't blink when I did. It didn't frown when I frowned. Its face stayed still, watching me with the calm curiosity of a stranger. Then, after several seconds, it began to smile. I stepped back, knocking over the basin behind me. But the glass showed nothing now, just a tired face, wild-eyed and unwashed. My own, probably. That was when I found the trap door. I'd never noticed it before, but the rug under the fireplace had shifted slightly enough for one rusted metal ring to peek out from the warped floorboards. I pulled it open, expecting dust or maybe an old cellar. But there were steps and water dripping and the faint sound of the radio lullaby, but backwards. I brought a flashlight and descended. The air grew colder with each step, but not the kind of cold that touches your skin. It sank into me, like the marrow in my bones was freezing. The stairs led to a narrow tunnel, carved directly into the earth. Stone walls, damp and breathing. They pulsed slightly, as if inhaling behind my back. I kept going. I had to. At the end of the passage was a wooden door, swollen with moisture. It opened without effort. Inside was a chamber impossible in size, far too large to exist beneath the cabin. The floor was a sheet of still water, mirror flat, stretching out into darkness. And rising from that surface, evenly spaced, were dozens of wooden posts, some empty, some with figures standing silently atop them. Their skin glistened with lake water, their heads bowed, all facing inward. They didn't move, but I recognized them. The woman who ran the general store, the ranger who'd waved to me on my second day, the boy I saw fishing in the fog long ago, even my cousin, all of them, still and soaked, standing vigil in that impossible room beneath the cabin. And in the center, a post stood empty, waiting. I stumbled backward, but my foot sank into the water, and I felt it not cold, not wet. It felt like memory, like hands on my shoulder from years ago, like a song my mother used to hum when I was sick, like every true thing I thought I'd forgotten. And beneath it all, a voice, not spoken, felt. You are not the first. You came willingly. You remembered what you were made of. I dropped the flashlight. It didn't fall into the water. It floated in midair, suspended just above the surface, still casting its beam forward. The reflection it threw onto the far wall wasn't mine. It was the reflection of someone kneeling, then slowly standing. A figure emerged from the far edge of the water, pale, thin, not bloated like something drowned, but clean and unfinished, like something not yet named. Its eyes were hollow, but aware. It mirrored my movements. When I stepped back, so did it. When I raised my hand, it did too, half a beat slower, like it was learning. And then it spoke, with my voice. But it didn't speak words. It spoke moments. The memory of being 10 years old and hiding in a closet during a storm. The guilt of not calling my father before he passed. The shame of smiling when I finally quit. All of it, all at once, like a flood behind my eyes. I fell to my knees. And that's when I saw the walls weren't made of stone. They were made of mirrors. Each one showed me a version of myself. Some older, some younger, some terrified, some content, all of them trapped, watching. There was never a lake. Not in the way we think of lakes. There was a mouth in the world, a soft, breathing mouth that drank memory and gave stillness in return. It was here long before the trees, before the maps forgot its name. People come here when they no longer wish to carry their own weight. They come for peace, but they stay as echoes. And I had heard them all. That's what the rain was. Not water them. Endless soft weeping from those who stayed. their grief echoing through the clouds, their silence filling the woods, their reflections waiting to be remembered. The post in the center of the chamber was still empty, and I knew what it wanted. Not my body, my shape, something to wear, to walk in, to speak with, so it could call the next one. I ran. I don't remember how. The tunnel collapsed behind me in soundless implosion, as if the air had been swallowed. The trapdoor slammed shut before I even reached the top. The floor above was dry, cold, but something had changed. The picture on the wall was back, and I was in it now, standing next to my cousin, waving. It's raining again today. Not that it ever really stopped, but there's something softer about it now, less like weather, more like memory. I've stopped checking the calendar. The pages curled away weeks ago, damp and thin like old petals. The radio plays on its own again. I don't try to bury it anymore. It hums softly in the corner, replaying the lullaby, not backwards now, not warped, just slow, familiar. I recognize it. My mother used to hum it when I had fevers as a child. I asked her once where she learned it, and she said, "I think I brought it with me." I didn't understand then. I do now. The lake is quieter these days. Still, yes, always still, but the unease is gone. Or maybe I've just become part of it. I still see the ripples sometimes, even when there's no wind. Sometimes I whisper to them, and sometimes they whisper back. I don't leave the cabin anymore. Not because I'm afraid, because I've accepted it. There is a kind of peace in being forgotten, a weight that lifts when you finally stop reaching for explanations. I used to fear what was beneath the surface. Now I know it's everything I've tried to leave behind, and everything that gently waited for me to stop running. I think this place is old, older than any map or memory. It doesn't want to hurt anyone. It just wants to be remembered, to have a voice. And so it borrows one. Mine. Now, sometimes, in the haze before sleep, I feel myself walking the edge of the lake, not with legs, with something else, something broader, a presence that rises through the trees and slips into windows, watching, listening, and sometimes I hear cars on the road, new voices, people like me, tired, hollowed out by noise, people looking for somewhere soft to vanish. I know the pattern now. It begins with the sign, Grayer Lake, 6 miles. I never remember putting it back up, but it always returns. Sometimes I dream of that post in the chamber below, still empty, still waiting. But when I wake, I feel my own weight in the bed, my breath, my pulse, and I tell myself, you're still here, but mirrors don't lie, not here. And each morning, when I catch my reflection, there's a moment just before it aligns where I see it hesitate, like it's remembering which version of me to be today. I wonder how long that will last. I wonder how many of us are watching ourselves from the other side, waiting, listening, calling. If you're hearing this, if this story made its way to you, somehow don't look for the lake. If you've already seen the sign, it's too late. Just don't follow the road. Stay noisy. Stay awake. Stay forgetful. Because once the lake remembers you, you never really leave. you only reflect. Forever. The train didn't go that far anymore. At least, not with passengers. The last stop was a hollow terminal on the outskirts of the city, a place people only remembered during heat waves, when the rails warped and transit officials dug out ancient maps looking for alternatives. That's where I got off. No one else disembarked. No one even looked up. It was the kind of station where light didn't really reach the floor. Just long, flickering overhead strips that buzzed with low voltage and history. Everything smelled faintly of iron and mildew. I waited until the train doors closed behind me and the car vanished into the dark tunnel with a hiss, leaving only echoes behind. Then I walked down the service stairwell marked Authorized Maintenance Only. They called it Line 6 Blue, but the employees had another name for it, the Bone Tunnel. It used to run below the city's oldest neighborhood, a failed experiment in subterranean design from the 40s. The line had been shut down for over 2 decades. Officially, they blamed structural instability, funding issues, vibration faults. Unofficially, no one wanted to work down there anymore. The rumors started back when I was in school, that conductors got lost between stations, that platforms moved, that some shifts came back with time-stamped footage missing whole hours. So naturally, the company kept the entire section buried, not decommissioned, just sealed. But lately, something had changed. Sensors buried along the abandoned rail bed started pinging. Low-frequency tremors, unexplained temperature drops, sudden static bursts in the underground comms. Nothing that would alarm a city, but enough to warrant a technician, someone like me. They gave me a 1-month assignment. Solo. Hazard pay. No need to file daily reports, just document equipment function, flag any faults, and keep an eye on the relay feeds from the tunnels. A temp bunk had been set up inside a utility chamber just beneath Hollow Street Station, a repurposed signal room, outfitted with a cot, supplies, and a sealed keypad door. No one above would be checking in. No one else was assigned. They told me it would be peaceful. That's why I said yes. Not for the money, not for the work, but for the quiet. It had been 8 months since my sister died. 8 months of staring through people, avoiding rooms with sunlight, and pretending I still remembered how to eat at regular intervals. Everyone offered different advice. Go hiking, get therapy, go back to work. But I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want light. I wanted the dark. The kind of dark that pressed down on your shoulders like a coat. The kind you could hide in. So when the notice came through, I didn't hesitate. I signed the waiver. I packed my bag, and I descended. The tunnel was deeper than I expected. 4 stories underground. Concrete walls painted with mold and old warnings. Pipes wept brown water. Rats scattered like thoughts when I clicked on my work light. The silence wasn't pure. It vibrated, like something massive and old had fallen asleep down there, snoring in slow vibrations you couldn't hear, only feel. The utility room was just past the old security booth. The keypad still worked. Inside, it was clean enough. 1 cot, a desk with analog monitors, 2 lockers, a vent fan that hummed like it resented being woken up, fluorescent lighting overhead, Old, but steady. No flicker. I unpacked, ate a dry protein bar. Then I sat and listened to the tunnel, just to feel it. Nothing moved, but I swear something was waiting. The first 3 days were uneventful. I walked the platform twice a day, logged temperatures, measured humidity, monitored the analog sensor tapes, all old school systems left over from the 70s. Surprisingly, most still worked. Occasionally the lights in the tunnel flickered, but that wasn't strange. What was strange was the dust. There was none. Not on the tracks, not on the rails, not on the benches that hadn't been touched since 1998. It looked recently cleaned, but there were no janitorial crews. Just me. I found the hatch on day 4, hidden behind a cracked advertising board on the west wall. It was flush with the concrete, painted over nearly invisible unless you looked for air movement. There was no official record of it in the station map I'd been given, but the latch opened easily. Behind it, a rusted spiral staircase, descending farther into black. The air that drifted out was colder than it should have been. Stale, like the inside of a forgotten thermos. I didn't go down that day, but I didn't seal it either. That night, I dreamed of my sister, not as she was, as she had been when I was young, 9 years old. Freckles, always barefoot. She stood on the opposite platform of the tunnel, lit by a single malfunctioning overhead light, smiling. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just stood, waiting, and behind her, in the dark, something moved. I woke up with my hand on the doorknob to the platform. I hadn't realized I'd gotten out of bed. I didn't open the door. Later that morning, I checked the station logs again, the digital access record from the nearby motion sensors. There were entries I didn't recognize. 3 times during the night, motion had been detected on the west platform, but I hadn't heard anything. No alarms, no footsteps, only the sound of water dripping behind the walls. I decided to seal the hatch that evening, but when I returned to the advertising board, it was gone. The wall was seamless, like it had never been there at all, but I remembered the cold air, the rusted steps, the feeling that something below had opened its eye and seen me, and wasn't ready to close it again. I started leaving the work light on at night. There was no real reason, at least. None I could explain in the maintenance logs. The bulb flickered every few hours, but something about its weak, constant hum made the room feel less hollow. It was the quiet that got to me, the kind of silence you only find underground. No birds, no wind, no human breath. Just the long, low groan of a tunnel remembering it used to be alive. I didn't go looking for the hatch again, but it didn't matter. The next night, it found me, or rather a sound found me. A distant metallic clatter, like something dropped a crowbar on concrete, deep in the tunnel. I waited, holding my breath, counting the seconds between echoes. Nothing followed it. No footsteps. Just that one, deliberate noise. I filed a note in the log. Unidentified tunnel disturbance. Possible pipe shift or structural resonance. A lie, technically, because what I heard wasn't structural. It was intentional. Day 7. I walked the length of the station to check the emergency relay cabinet. Standard protocol. But as I passed the old turnstiles, I noticed a smear of moisture on the wall. Faint, just above waist height. 5 vertical streaks, like someone had dragged wet fingers along the tile. I touched it. It was cold. Sticky. Not water. Not quite. That night, the monitors flickered on their own. Their analog no-motion triggers, no AI, just hardwired lines from old tunnel cameras. Most of them hadn't shown anything but static since I arrived. But one Cam 6C, which faced the sealed end of the west tunnel, clicked into view just after midnight. The screen showed movement, something in the distance, too far to see clearly, just a blur at the edge of frame, low to the ground, barely distinguishable from the wall shadows. I watched for 5 full minutes. It didn't move closer, but it didn't leave either. In the morning, the feed was gone again. Static. I rewound the tape. It never recorded. Like that moment had happened outside the system, just for me. I tried calling the maintenance office. The uplink buzzed once, then silence. The manual override line didn't work either. The third time I tried, the screen displayed one message before shutting off completely. You are not the first. I stopped logging reports after that. They would have been full of things I couldn't explain. The smell of rain, even though we were 4 stories underground. The way my boots would be damp in the morning, even though the floor was dry. The voice I thought I heard in the vent, calling my name in my sister's tone. By the second week, the tunnel's layout had started to shift. I know how that sounds, but I walked it every morning, counted my steps, checked the station markers, measured the distance between the platform edge and the north wall. On day 13, it was 6 feet farther. On day 14, it was back to normal. On day 15, it was gone completely. Just open tunnel, no end wall. The space didn't feel like it had grown. I felt like I had shrunk. The dreams came back, not just of my sister, but of something behind her. A shape just out of sight, always at the edge of the frame. Tall, but wrong. Arms that bent too many times. A face like wet cement, smoothing over as I tried to focus. She would stand in front of it like she was protecting it, or worshiping it. She never looked afraid, only sorry. I woke up one morning to find an item sitting on my cot. A toy. Old. A tiny blue plastic elephant, its ears bent inward from age. I hadn't seen it in years. It had belonged to my sister. I remembered it from when we were kids. She used to tuck it into the pillowcase every night. I'd buried it with her. I ran. Straight up the corridor. Into the tunnel. Didn't look back. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to be away from the room, from the light, from the thing that left the toy. I must have walked for hours. But the tunnel never ended. Just curved slightly. Then again. Then again. Until I saw something ahead. A faint light. I followed it and found myself standing in front of the utility room door. Not the back of it. The front. As though I'd never left. I stepped inside and found the toy was gone. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to the wall and watched the door. At 3:12 a.m., The light outside flickered once. Then I heard breathing. Not heavy, not human, just slow inhalation and a voice whispering, "You're almost hollow enough." The next morning, I checked the walls for cracks. I don't know why, but I found one just behind the power conduit. A hairline seam, narrow but long. I pressed my ear to it. I heard a sound. Not voices. Not breathing. Typing. Like dozens of fingers hammering out keystrokes on old mechanical keyboards. But it never formed words. Just repetition. I don't leave the cot much anymore. The hallway outside changes now. The walls sometimes feel closer. The lights go dim, then flare again like someone is adjusting them just behind the ceiling tiles. Sometimes I hear footsteps above me. There is no floor above me. The hatch hasn't reappeared. But I know it will when the station decides I'm ready. I don't fear what's beneath anymore. I fear that it's not beneath at all. That it's already here, woven into the concrete, the rust, the very signal running through the relay monitors. Something that never left. Something that wants me to stay. I stopped trusting time. Not suddenly, gradually. Like I was waking from a deep sleep into a room where all the clocks ran in different directions. At first it was the watch. It froze at 2:17 a.m. for what felt like hours, then skipped forward by 6, then reversed. I replaced the battery. It died within the hour. Then the wall timer on the console began counting faster. Not seconds, frames, micro intervals I couldn't track. One night, I watched it loop. 3点12分6秒 3点12分7秒 3点12分8秒 3点12分6秒 over and over until it hit 3, 12, 13. Then the lights cut out. I tried keeping a journal. That worked for a while, until I flipped back and realized some pages had been written in my handwriting, but not by me. Entries I don't remember making. Phrases I would never use. The hallway turned again last night. I let it. She was in the vent this time. Closer. Closer. The scratching stopped. I think it's inside now. I stopped writing. The journal wrote without me. Cam 6C came back. The static cleared just long enough for me to catch a glimpse. Not movement this time. A figure, standing at the far end of the tunnel. Same position as the one in my dreams. Same posture. A head tilted just too far. A shadowed mouth stretched long and low, open but silent. It didn't approach, but the frame began to drift. The camera itself was moving, slowly, panning toward the figure. That's impossible. The camera is bolted in place. I yanked the plug. When I rebooted, the feed was static again. But the camera, it was now angled differently, pointing directly down the center of the tunnel, waiting. I stopped going outside, not because of what I saw, but because the hallway changed. It bent. The floor angled downward. The tiles began to pulse, faintly like breathing. And then, on the 14th day, a second door appeared. Same as the first. Same keypad. Same blinking green light. I hadn't opened it, but it was unlocked. I stood there for an hour, my hand hovering over the latch. Then I walked away. The next day, it was gone. I started hearing the tunnel sing. That's the only word I have for it. A low hum, almost harmonic. Not like music, more like resonance. Like the walls were echoing something they'd heard a long time ago and were trying to remember. It rose from the pipes at night, filled the utility room with vibration. Not loud, just deep, like it was coming from below my lungs. I didn't tell anyone. There was no one to tell. Sometimes the lights flicker in rhythm with the hum, and when they do, the reflection in the window, the one facing the tunnel, shows 3 figures. Me, something behind me, and something just outside the glass. Each time I blink, they shift positions. One closer, one further, like a slow, deliberate waltz. I saw my sister again, not in a dream. She was standing on the opposite platform when the tunnel lights came on by themselves. No expression, no movement, just standing. She opened her mouth, and then her face folded in. Not bloody, not violent, just reversed, like it was turning inside out. The lights went dark. When they came back, the platform was empty, but the bench now held the blue toy elephant. This time, I didn't pick it up. I tried to leave the next morning, packed what little I had, marched down the corridor, through the hallway, toward the original stairwell. Only the stairwell wasn't there, just a wall, solid concrete, a small plaque embedded in the middle, engraved with 5 words. You were always down here. I screamed then, louder than I've ever screamed in my life. Not because I was afraid, but because, for a brief, horrifying second, I believed it. Since then, the relay station has grown. I don't know how. There are new rooms, a second sleeping chamber with no bed, a mirrored hallway that distorts my shadow but not my reflection, a stairwell that descends without steps, just a slope and the sound of rushing water. I don't remember them being constructed. They simply are. Each morning, something new is there, as though the station is learning me, one layer at a time, building itself around my shape, around my grief. I've begun dreaming of the tunnel from above, like I'm looking down through transparent soil. The station glows a faint blue pulse, and beneath it, far deeper than any foundation should reach, there's a chamber, circular, organic, and inside, them coiled around each other like roots, long limbs, blank faces, breathing in slow harmony, and in the center a chair, empty, waiting. The cameras all show static now, except one. The feed from Cam 6C sometimes flickers at 3:12 a.m., only for a second. But every time it does, I see myself in the frame, not standing, not walking, but seated, staring back, smiling. I woke up to the smell of earth, not the dry dust of subway stone, but rich soil, loamy, alive, the kind of scent you only notice in spring right after a thaw, that impossible moment when the ground exhales. Except I was underground. Except there had been no thaw, only the same static air I'd been breathing for weeks. The utility room had changed again. The ceiling was higher, the cot had vanished, and the door was gone. In its place, a tunnel of wet roots, grown through cracked tile and concrete. The walls pulsed faintly, like lungs inhaling the silence. I didn't panic. I think I was past that. I picked up my flashlight and stepped forward. The passage curved sharply, narrowing as it turned. It smelled stronger down there, like rot beneath something sweet. My boots stuck slightly as I moved. After 20 or 30 steps, I found the first mirror, set into the wall. Not glass, water, a flat surface, still as bone, smooth as black ice. When I leaned in, it showed a reflection that wasn't mine. Not quite. My face, my features, but no eyes, just two wide voids. And when it opened its mouth, it whispered, "We're almost aligned." I didn't respond. I moved on. More tunnels, more mirrors. Each one showed a different version of me. One with a missing jaw, one smiling too wide, eyes rotating in slow, wet circles. One curled into a fetal position, rocking against glass. I kept walking, and eventually, I reached the chamber. It wasn't built. It was grown. A sphere of exposed root and wire. Moist walls breathing in time with my pulse. In the center, a pit of glowing light. Above it, the chair. Old. Rusted. It looked like a cross between a subway seat and an operating table. Behind it, the figure. The same one I'd seen in dreams. In Cam 6C, in the corner of my peripheral vision. It stood at least 8 feet tall. Its limbs were thin and long, too long. Its face had no features, just the imprint of suggestion, a hint of eye sockets, a memory of a mouth. It didn't speak. It transmitted, not with words, with feeling, all at once. It hit me like a flood. 1,000 memories I didn't recognize, moments of grief from strangers, regrets, isolation, cold metal rails, abandoned homes, lost voices calling through walls, grief in every form. It filled the room like mist, and beneath it all, a single truth. This is where all the forgotten come. The relay wasn't a station. It was a filter, a collection point, a mouth in the soil of the city, open for decades, feeding on those who slipped through the cracks. Not in violence, not in cruelty, just absorption. It didn't want to consume me. It wanted to echo me, to preserve something real, to file away my loneliness alongside all the others, storing it in its living memory like a stone dropped in still water. The chair pulsed once, and I knew I had sat in it before. Not once. Many times, I had walked this tunnel, through these roots, reached this room, and chosen. Each time, I forgot. Each time, I began again. The figure stepped aside, inviting, and I stepped forward, because I remembered then, not just my sister, but what I had come here to do. When she died, I stopped being a person. I became a shadow. I'd felt it walking through the world like a passenger in my own body, pretending to care, nodding when spoken to, smiling in photos I didn't remember taking. The world above didn't know what to do with grief like mine, but this place did. It listened, it remembered, and it offered a home. I sat in the chair. The light beneath pulsed brighter. The walls began to tremble. The figure behind me placed one long hand on my shoulder. I closed my eyes, and I saw everything. All the others who had sat here, all the fragments of sorrow that had been filed into the earth, not lost, just looped, whispering forever in the wires, in the roots, in the pulse of the relay. And then I heard her voice, clear, close. You don't have to carry it anymore. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on the platform, alone. The station was silent, still. The camera in the corner blinked red. Watching, recording, waiting. The light never came back. Not fully. Just a faint blue haze that seeped from cracks in the tunnel walls, like bioluminescence deep underwater. The fluorescent bulbs no longer buzzed. The relay console blinked slowly, as if breathing. And I was still here, but different. I walked the platform now, barefoot. I don't remember when I stopped needing my boots. The ground is warm. It hums gently beneath each step, like an old motor buried far below. Sometimes I think I can feel footsteps echoing up from beneath me, not mine. Just others, circling, pacing in patterns I no longer recognize. Sometimes I pace with them. There are no clocks. I no longer need them. Days blur in the soft pulse of light. I eat, though I don't know where the food comes from anymore. It's always there, beside the cot, which has returned. Clean sheets, folded blanket, as though the station is taking care of me now, or preserving me. I still hear her voice sometimes. My sister, not calling for help, not crying, just humming. The same lullaby she used to hum when we were kids. Out of tune, no real rhythm, but perfect. Perfect in that it could only come from her. I tried writing again. The journal was back on the desk one morning, open to a blank page. I wrote. I remember now. The ink bled through the paper, soaked it, like the journal drank the words. I turned the page. Another was blank. I wrote again. I chose to stay. That page didn't soak. It burned just slightly, edges curling, then healed, back to blank. I don't try anymore. Sometimes I sit at the end of the platform and stare into the tunnel. The lights never reach far, but I see shapes, standing just beyond the edge of illumination. Not threatening, not waiting, just mirroring. When I lean left, so do they. When I breathe, they shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt. Some are shaped like me. Some are shaped like nothing I can name, but they are mine, pieces of me, echoes. There's a door at the far end of the hall now. It's always closed, but once, just once, it was open. Inside, a small room with glass walls, like a subway control center, and in the center, a chair, facing a panel, above it, a monitor. On that screen, my life. Clips, out of order. My sister's laughter, A fight with my father. Me in college, sleeping through class. Me walking, lost, on the day after her funeral. Me standing before this very tunnel, unaware I had been here before. I stood and watched. The figure from the chamber stood behind me again, hand on my shoulder, and this time I turned to face it. I asked not aloud, not in words, why me? Its response was not language, but I understood, because you were already fading, because you were already half gone, because your grief was loud enough to reach the wires. I wept, not from fear, from relief. I had spent so long trying to feel human again, trying to force joy, normalcy, purpose. But the station didn't ask for that. It asked only for truth. It recorded me as I was, and offered to hold me. I have stopped fighting it, stopped looking for exits, stopped asking what day it is, because I know now, this station is not beneath the city. It is beneath memory, beneath everything we bury when we pretend to move on. It is where the lost go when they are too quiet to be noticed, too tired to be found. The final note I leave not for rescue, not for warning is this. If you find yourself here, don't run. It doesn't want your fear. It wants your echo. It wants the shape you leave behind when the world forgets to ask if you're okay. And if you let it, it will remember you. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us ever wanted. To be remembered, even if only in the static, even if only in the hum beneath the rails, where no one hears us, but something always does.